Welcome, everyone, to What the Force. I'm Marie Claire.
And I'm Missy.
And we are your meta mythic masters, and you are all our acolytes. We are covering Star Wars The Acolyte from a meta mythic folklore fairy tale perspective, and it has been our pleasure to be your guides on this mythical journey for the past 8 episodes.
It has
Yes.
been so much fun. My overall takeaway right now is I love Star Wars.
I love Star Wars too. And you know who I love so much? All of the people that listen to this show, because
Yes.
holy heck, I did a call out in like multiple places for questions, and we got 4 pages of comments and questions, and they were all wonderful. And I always put them all in the same document so Missy can read through them and see all of the praise and love, and we love it so much.
Yes. Thank you so much. Y'all have a lot of thoughts and feelings, and we love them all.
And if you're interested, of course, in supporting the show, make sure to like, subscribe, share content on wherever you want to have people pay attention to what you're saying about the show, but also my Patreon, where I make bonus posts about the show, and I'm probably going to be thinking about for a very long time because I have really, really loved this.
Yeah, same. I have to say I thought it started strong, and but I was still kind of like, okay, this is cool or whatever, and then it really picked up at the midpoint and then just got better and better and better, and now I am so energized, and for the first time in a long time I want to go back and watch it all from the beginning and like study every little bit of it, and I am excited to read fan fiction and probably write some fan fiction, and like I'm just really, really stoked, and I need the announcement of season 2 like yesterday. I need it right now.
I need it too.
I need it.
I would say that when you have a good story like this that ties into the mythic and symbolic elements that we've been talking about, that's the end. That's the end result. You're energized. You're full of creative energies. That's the apotheosis of media that I always talk about. And it's great to actually see it happen, and that the entire fandom is sort of like vibrating in a way because of the resonance of the story. And so I'm just obsessed. It also has been making me want to re-engage in Star Wars stories I haven't watched in a little while.
Oh my God. Okay. So it's so funny that you mentioned that, because like halfway through the run of Acolyte, my family, the 4 of us, we started watching Rebels together. Now, my husband and I have seen it before, but my kids have never seen Rebels. And we were like, we're going to sit down and start watching Rebels together. And they are loving it. And my husband and I are both going, this is even better than we remember. And we're like, so we're loving that. And then today, my daughter comes home and she's like, Mommy, I want to watch Star Wars. I was like, what Star Wars do you want to watch? And she goes, I want to watch Return of the Jedi. I thought, okay. So she watched Return of the Jedi. And then as soon as that was over, she like turned on Clone Wars. And I'm sitting here going like, yes. And now we're planning to do a family doubleheader of Rogue One and A New Hope, because I've always wanted to watch them back to back, and I haven't done it yet. And so anyway, so the point is, I'm just like, to your point, I'm just like, yes, give me all the Star Wars. Like I was going through a period of time where I was in a little bit of a Star Wars drought, and I was kind of like, I don't know. And now I'm like, yeah, all the Star Wars.
It also helped that like I got to go to Batuu and see Galaxy's Edge while
That's fair.
This is all happening. Like it really energized me, but also my kids have loved every episode.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Like, and
That's
they
so
want
great.
to talk about it with me. Like they're like, they want to even maybe do an episode, which I was like,
oh my God, please do.
What? You haven't heard their voices on this particular podcast in a really long time. Last time I think we had watched, it was maybe one of the prequels or one of the original trilogy movies, and their voices were babies. So
I know.
It's been a really long time.
I've heard you guys relatively recently talking Marvel on What the Fiction, but that's probably the last time.
Yeah, but they've gotten very smart.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll see, but they wanted to watch every episode. They told me I wasn't allowed to watch it without them.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which, I mean, kind of put a kink in my, I like to watch it first thing. And so sometimes I had to wait a couple of hours or,
How dare.
remind them, hey guys, I got to watch it so I can start to take notes with Missy or she's going to be really disappointed because I'm so slow. But, no, it was great. And I have to say, I've really loved the fandom. I've really loved the media coverage that the show has been getting,
Oh my God.
especially, kudos to I assume Lucasfilm PR team who's just been approving like check marking, green lighting, red stamping everything that has come across. Especially Maggie Lovett's
Yes.
recent article that just came out today, Thursday, we're recording. It is brilliant. She
Oh my
used
gosh.
symbolism and talked about all sorts of stuff that I absolutely love. I will try to link to it wherever I'm posting stuff, but
Yes.
it is great. It was on Collider, so you could probably find it there. It was sort of a deep dive after the last episode. And we love Leslie Headland.
Oh, we love Leslie so much. She's already married, so I can't say spare-handed marriage, but lady, we love you so much.
We like a coven of witches.
Yes.
Devote ourselves to your leadership as our mother.
Yes. 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 Mother in every sense of the word. Yeah.
Yes. Mother was mothering.
Mother is mothering.
No, she's just like so smart. She's really into it. She loves Star Wars. She loves telling stories for kind of everybody. And I think everyone can get something out of this story. And it's
absolutely
beautiful.
I love it. I love it. It's it crept up on me and became one of my favorite things now. So I am really pleased.
And it's the gift that keeps on giving because it
is.
sparks the imagination and inspires the creativity, just like all good Star Wars does. So let's get into some comments and questions. Again, we had 4 pages of them.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone. We might have to figure out if we do a post episode at some point to dig into other questions that people might have after they ruminate and sit with our analysis for a little while. But we did have a few that we wanted to make sure to cover.
Yeah. And I think that the key thing here is, like we said, with having so many, the way that we selected these is a lot of people have very similar questions, which is great. It means everyone's kind of on the same wavelength about the things that they're noticing, the things they're wondering about. So, if we missed your question, please understand it's probably just, because it's a great question and there's lots of other great questions very similar to it. So we're trying to sum them all up to the best of our ability. So the first question that we're going to cover is, and there's a little long, so I might condense it a bit. This one came from Patreon from Ben Slizek. Sorry, I bad at pronunciation. And it is seems more clear to me than ever before. The Sith are just the Jedi's shadow version, representing everyone and everything they messed up and which they put away into places no one is allowed to go to. They are nothing but the suppressed emotions and experiences of the Jedi that will grow until their eventual fall that we see in the prequels. Now, if the OT is about the healing journey and the sequels are about learning to let life move on with all of your wounds, how does the Acolyte recontextualize post-TROS Star Wars as a whole? What is it that needs to happen in Star Wars regarding Force users to become whole again? So I'm going to stop there because this is a great question and I think we should consider it. What do you think, Marie Claire?
Oh my goodness. Yes. So here's the thing that some people don't understand. So from a Jungian archetype perspective and from the idea of the shadow, there is also something called the collective unconscious, which is generally how all of us humans communicate sort of subconsciously, either through our culture or we all kind of just understand things. That's where the archetypes live, right? So culturally, when you're brought up in a particular culture, you're brought up as a human, you are given certain archetypes through just living and in society. And in that, we also have cultural shadows, country shadows, human shadows that follow us. The biggest shadow that Canada still has is our residential school shadow that literally is something we're still trying to like deal with as a society. And in some ways we're trying to deal with it through reconciliation and understanding where the problems happened, and trying to make it something where we never make the mistake again, and that we also acknowledge the uniqueness and beauty of the cultures around us that are part of the whole. And so I'm not saying that Canada always gets things right, but I do think that in this instance, it is something that we are working on, which is sometimes all you can do with shadows. But the worst thing you can do is deny their existence, because they just get bigger and they get more smelly. Robert Bly has some beautiful imagery about how it's like a trash bag that is following you behind. And when you take out your shadow and you have to deal with it, oftentimes when men have to deal with femininity for the first time when they're about 30, because they've denied it their whole lives, it's often very hostile to them. So yes, the Jedi have a hostile shadow that is
they
the
do.
Sith.
They absolutely do. Like the whole concept here of the Jedi creating the Sith because it is their shadow. Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
I actually think it would be super interesting to see that creation, because it would end up being something went wrong and the Jedi didn't deal with it correctly. So we're getting a taste of that in the Acolytes.
And to this question about, does it recontextualize post-Trust Star Wars? What would need to happen in Star Wars to become whole again? And I think to be very bluntly honest, I don't think it changes anything about trust. And I think, if anything, it throws the problem into sharper relief. What we know is that the shadow was denied or killed in Tross. It has not been integrated. It has not been dealt with. It has not been acknowledged. It's still there. We know that. And so
maybe why it's so big into Sheevdemption?
Yeah, Sheevdemption, or
just even
whatever,
reconciling with Ben, like that would have been a version of it, and then they create a brand new order together that
or
also accounts for emotions and things like that.
Yeah,
like, it's very apparent that cutting off your emotions is part of the problem.
Right. Well, and this is something we're going to talk about as we go through, is the concept of part of the Jedi's shadow in this story is that cutting yourself off from the love of others results in death, both literal and metaphorical, right? Yep. You are spiritually dead, and then you are potentially actually dead. And the only path to life is the power of two, the power of many, blah, blah, blah. That's so connections with others. That is the path.
Apotheosis only happens by realizing that you're actually interconnected with other people.
Right.
So before that, you're actually in a spiritually dead state that you can't get out of, and you end up becoming a villain.
Right. Yeah. So So we'll get into all this in the episode, but just to say, very insightful. Yes, we agree. No, unfortunately, it doesn't really fix anything from Tross, because the only way they can fix that is to have a different outcome. So hopefully one day.
Maybe one day.
One day. Yeah. All right. Next question. All right. From Didadoon. Another thought I just...
Also Shihaya Springs on
Yes,
Twitter.
Shihaya Springs. Yes. I was just thinking about the Dark Union episode you did about theorizing for Tross and the role Palpatine would play. What if Plagueis will actually be that for Osha and Qimir? Plagueis wanting to use Osha for that creation of life he's been wanting, like Dark Union, but then Qimir is who she's really meant to create life with. Yeah, I'm here for this. Yeah. I'm here for this. I mean, I want it.
This goes into a question we're going to talk about later. Like, I think probably like, what is the purpose of Plagueis?
Yep. Yes. Yes. And we will talk about that. But I think here's the thing. There was another question that was basically like, is it just an Easter egg? No, it's super deliberate. I think there's a lot of very good, clear reasons why he was introduced at this point in time in this story with these characters. this is going to play in huge into what we know of him, and what we know he becomes. So
There's
yes.
also a question about Qimir redemption and if there's any sort of changes in that. And I think that it's totally on the table.
Absolutely. Definitely. So we'll talk about this, but he has changed archetypes and
he
therefore
did. And he died. He died.
Yes.
He died.
I know.
Spiritually, he died.
I know.
We'll get through that. It's fine. We're excited.
It's okay. We're all right. We're fine. We're fine.
Okay. It's good.
Yeah. Spiritual death just really excites Marie Claire. Okay.
Oh God, I'm so predictable. I was like, okay, so when I talk about Qimyr's arc, there's going to be like the guy with all the push pins and like the conspiracy theory gif. And I'm like, look at him. Look at him go. Yeah.
I love it. It's so great. That's okay. It's all right. If people can predict, it's just because they listen. That's good.
I love you guys.
Yes, we love you all so much. So, all right. So then this question, also excellent. Needler would love more on May. Struggling with her arc a bit. Maybe it's because it felt so sudden and sad. Osha gets to run off with a partner/master while May has to sacrifice herself and taken in by the Jedi. Since her memory is only up to 8, is this some kind of reincarnation motif? Like their character gets a reroll on the Jedi arc to fulfill it in a different way this time around. Both end up being part of the Jedi in the end. Would love to hear both your thoughts on May and what her arc was about and where she could go.
Okay. In some ways, because of the eclipse motifs, we knew that they were going to switch places. We knew pretty early on that May was going to end up with the Jedi somehow. So it's really hard in Star Wars to give murderers a redemption arc that feels like it's something that's realistic. In fact, you'll get a lot of YouTubers telling them that they should have gone towards a tribunal. And it's really hard to do redemption without death from a societal perspective. So this is a spiritual death, which we talk about a lot, in that she has lost all of the memories of the bad things that have happened before. I have no doubt that she will regain them somehow in the future.
Eventually.
But this is giving her an opportunity to be reborn, a brand new baby. A baby, and have a new chance to learn a different perspective. It's also tied to the fact that they are always switching and they need to sort of experience each other's lives.
Yes. Yeah. So it is going to be an important step for her to go on to becoming a more whole person. Because also you got to keep in mind that as much as she went on this wonderful arc over the course of this season and she's had a lot of growth, she also kind of she was stuck, but also she completed her goal, right? What was she doing? She was out for revenge and basically
she wanted to find Osha.
Right.
In the end, that was there was like a lie that she was telling herself that the Jedi were to blame everything. But the truth was actually that she was missing Osha. So she completed that. She got the catharsis that she needed for that. And now she is reborn in an opportunity to become a more whole person and have a more supportive potential life. Being that she is going to be taken care of and have support from somebody. Vern, questionable about how good that support will be, but we'll see.
Well, but it's gonna be very important to still have her perspective of the Jedi, even if it's not complete necessarily as we move forward. Because what we know from this point is now that the Jedi are quite corrupt. So having a main character on the inside is very important. Someone who should, even if she doesn't immediately, should eventually find herself in opposition to like Vernestra.
And she will be
it's important.
Questioning probably with her instincts that she will be uncovering. And she'll probably kind of be like, I think it was referenced maybe in an article that she's going to be kind of like Jason Bourne in discovering her powers, which is a huge heroine's journey motif. It's an internalized struggle to discover your powers. We've talked a lot about this, about the hidden goddess. She was not incredibly powerful because she was stuck in her vixen motif and archetype, whereas Osha has had an opportunity to grow and she wants to grow more. So she was okay with taking a step back and sort of recovering and starting anew.
She was also acknowledging that even if it wasn't entirely her fault, she did act to try to prevent Osha from following her dreams. And so this final act of self-sacrifice, it is an act of redemption. It's saying, I won't stand in your way. That's what she says. She says, I won't stand in your way this time. What she's saying is, I love you so much. I'm going to do what I need to do so that you can live your dream. And that in this case,
I'll be a tool to protect you too.
Right.
Because I'll lose my memory and they won't be able to follow you.
Right. Right. And even though I think that plot wise, I can see how that might be a little shaky, it is, again, it's important for her character from a growth perspective. And mythically, we keep in mind also that loss of memory is a death state. So she's entering into a different kind of death state than the one that she was in before.
It's a rebirth,
Right, exactly. But she won't be totally reborn because the awakening is typically not complete until the person regains their memories. That's usually the last step in any sort of resurrection or reawakening, is the person will regain their memories. So that is going to be a final step for her at some point.
Yep. Okay, so the next question is from Jedi Geek Girl. What are the mythic implications of introducing Plagueis to the story of Osha's in a continuation of this story? How would it have been different if he wasn't inserted? And finally, does he overshadow the story since we know his story? This is really all super interesting to me.
Yeah. And we'll go into more depth, I think, when we get into the episode. But I think the main thing that I want to say here, and I know this is easy to say now, right? After the fact, for me to be like, I saw this coming. But like, I want to point out that there were times much, much earlier watching the show where I kept thinking to myself, I wonder if they're going to bring Plagueis in, because this is the only place I could think of where it makes thematic sense to do it. Because we know he was using the Force to create life itself. And so
the themes are the same.
Right. The minute they said that in episode 3, they created life using the Force, I was like, like antennae went up, and I'm like, hang on a minute. But the reason I didn't bring it up, and this is on me, in fairness, the reason I didn't bring it up is because so many of the like toxic fans are so obsessed with Plagueis, and it's like all they ever talk about. They're like, oh, what is it going to be, Plagueis? That I just was like, I'm not going to be one of those people. So I didn't say anything.
Yeah, there was a few that they were throwing around. Okay, so would it have been different? I think that this shows a hope for this future of the story.
I agree.
I think that also he doesn't overshadow the story, since we know his story, because we don't know Osha's story. We don't know Qimir's story. We don't know May's story. We don't even know Vernestra's story. We don't know anybody but that little green man sitting in the office.
That's right.
We don't know anybody's story. Just the 2 cameos, we know their stories. Okay, so they're going to be the big chess kings on either side of the board, and the little pawns and bishops and knights running around in the middle. We don't know what happens to them, right? But also from a adventurer's journey, heroine's hero's journey, when you end up coming back from the underworld with the elixir and you are transformed in so many ways and you are at peace momentarily, inevitably another dragon threatens the world. But it is at a bigger scale. Think Death Star Part 2. Like, it's not just the Death Star, it's Star Killer Base. Like, like inevitably there's another threat to the kingdom, but it's a bigger scale because you have grown as a person in a life archetype, and you need to have a bigger challenge, and the challenge changes over time. And so, yes, Plagueis coming in is a bigger challenge for our lovers and our Jedi. And you know what? That's okay, because a new challenge can be defeated in different ways. People were always like, oh my gosh, how do you, beat Thrawn? Well, I guess you send him to another galaxy for a while.
Yeah.
Like there are ways to deal with bad guys. And there's even ways to no longer be of notice to bad guys, like Maul.
Yeah.
Maul. Like he got out of the, thumb of Palpatine, and he survived. Like he survived that confrontation. It just, like, I think people worry because he has a particular path in place, and so yes, that does mean he's sort of a freight train that is going to be on time, but that doesn't mean that our characters won't dance around it.
Well, and I actually kind of love it because it sets up the conflict. It using the dramatic irony of, we know who he is. And because we know who he is, we know the story doesn't end here. And we know the sort of challenges that our heroes are going to be facing. We know, because of the whole virgins and, created life and everything, that he is probably going to target May and Osha. Because they have what he wants.
They've got the secret power. So yes, back to Shihaya Springs' question, it'll be a dark union no matter what we do.
Absolutely. He's
might
after
want
it.
Both of the twins.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, in fairness, Saul wanted both of the twins.
Yep.
He had this whole big thing about how, he couldn't prove the virgins unless he had both of them. So this is what people want from them. And we'll get into this, but that's actually what makes Qimir so different, is the fact that he actually doesn't want both of them. He just wants Osha.
And he sees them as unique people, whereas other people don't.
Yeah. Which brings us to the next question, which is the various moments Qimir stopped being a predator and became a question mark. I'm thinking of when he desperately worked to get the mask off of her and showed real concern, and the gentle wife guy role he fell into, and when he was scared of Vern.
So this is from at the Liminal Zone, who was a good friend of the show during Willow Time. We have missed you. Yes. Okay. He stopped being a predator and became a fill in the blank. He became a lover.
Yes, he became so he actually is the beastly husband now, but he's a different, we'll get into this. He's a different kind of beastly husband than we've seen before in Star Wars. And I'm excited to talk about that.
And he actually changes archetypes a lot in this episode in particular. He goes from lover to bully to coward. At least he wants to be a queen. There's some other stuff going on, but he dances all over the place very chimerically.
Yes.
But also he dies. So he does. He is a gentle wife guy.
He is.
To Osha, because he also on the island, and I did point it out in that episode, in episode 6, that he was functionally a lover in this, but I think it's important just to say he was actually a lover in that episode. Like, just, we'll stamp it, lover approved. So a lover is a flat archetype, and I can go into it now just so that it's like out of the way. But
sure,
a lover is a flat archetype that is primarily defined by somebody who has a lot of passion and devotion to something. So the key is to get a sense of unbridled or exaggerated affection in appreciation of someone or something. So you could be a lover if you're like the artist that's super obsessed with creating the perfect painting, or, wants to be super influential in life or environment. You could be a lover archetype. It is a flat archetype. So the example that K.M. Wayland always uses is everyone in Sense and Sensibility is a lover, which I love because it's like, okay, that makes sense. Most people in Pride and Prejudice are some sort of version of a lover. But it is a flat archetype, and it's really about helping another person on their arc who's stuck or hasn't really started to go forward in a positive direction or in a direction. The lover will often be the impetus for change for that person. And anytime somebody calls a guy a male wife or a wife guy, they're a lover.
Yep. Yeah.
And so Kylo Ren, Lover and
Yes,
TLJ.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah. But I think the key is like, if you want to talk specifically about what it is that he gives her that helps her progress on her journey, this is really important, because one of the things that defines Qimir is, for as much as he shifts between all these archetypes and is chimeric, his power, he knows, comes from his emotions, which means he does not deny his emotions. He's very honest about them. He's very open about them, and he acknowledges them. And so what that means is that when he is feeling attraction and care for Osha, he's not trying to hide that, and he's not denying that. He is embracing it because he views it as a source of his power. And what he does for Osha is encourages her to do the same. Like, acknowledge your emotions, tap into your emotions, use them, acknowledge them. And that's what she does, which is how she's able to come into her full power. So,
and the thing
that
about
is what he provides her.
That is entirely for the fic writers, is that he would be all about consent.
Yes,
and
totally.
would be like talking about everything, because like he has literally been that way their whole relationship so far. He talks about everything, and then he confirms she is okay with it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's sexy.
Yeah, it is. And remember what we said before about how, I mean, again, granted, his archetype has changed, but remember who he was when we came to the full realization that he was, in fact, the predator, the person in the mask, is we said the mask is who he is. He is, or was, at least at that point in time, the monster inside. That's who he is. And so again, it's this whole thing of when he puts on a mask, there is an honesty to it. There is a, this is who I am. I'm not hiding who I am. This is who I am. Now, again, we have seen him, because he has shifted the archetype a little bit, and he's still the monster, but now he's also the lover. And so because of that now, that has opened up a level of vulnerability, which is why you see him respond in fear when Vernestra appears.
Yep. It was also post his symbolic death. So
yes,
he's a new baby and thus scared of mommy.
Yes. Like, oh no.
Oh no.
Mommy's scary.
Mommy's so scary. All right. Our last question we're going to take today is from XUU. I do not know how to pronounce that, on Twitter. Osha is taking the same tunnel as May did to escape. Rebirth, question mark? Yes.
Yes, correct. Rebirth. I'm excited to get to that part in the story because it is, yes, absolutely, going through a little tunnel there after a death sequence to emerge into a new realization, a new life. Yes, absolutely, a rebirth. So well done.
All right, let's dig into themes and mythic motifs that we have. Just to high level some things for the episode, or things that we specifically need to call out in a larger meta perspective.
Sorry, I'm going to start just because it was important to me to call back to all the things that we've already talked about. So I wanted to start there. So first off, House of Atreus. We did an entire episode on this. If you haven't listened, I do recommend it. It really helps put all of Star Wars into context. And it's the story, of course, of this family that is constantly eating their young. And that is what the Jedi do in the Acolyte. Is they are consuming their young, they are consuming their power, they are consuming their individuality and their emotions. All the young apprentices have been used by their predatory mentors. And what happens is ultimately that results in the younger generation fighting back. They're trying to actually break those systems of oppression that have harmed them. And whereas in the original House of Atreus story, Orestes, the sort of last son of that house, ends up going on a journey of atonement and ultimately is redeemed and forgiven, and that thereby ends the curse upon his house. Soul never atones. Soul never acknowledges or apologizes for what he did. And that is why Osha kills him and the cycle of violence continues. So what we're seeing here is the path that the Jedi are on that will lead them to their eventual fall in the prequels, because they are consuming and they are not giving life. They
And
are
I
not creating life.
want to call out Betrayal of the Father, which I'm going to dig into in the episode, but it's actually part of the House of Atreus because of Agamemnon's betrayal of Iphigenia. He basically sacrifices her so that they can make their dinner date at the Trojan War, but it's not unlike how Sol was willing to sacrifice May and willing to sacrifice the truth to Osha. So it is an important motif that is also tied to the House of Atreus.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really important. It's important to keep in mind that while Osha does have agency, the inertia of the story and all the events and all the choices that other characters made put her on the path to ultimately make the choice she does. And that's very important here. And it's a very common tragic format for stories, is that ultimately you put this character in a position where they couldn't necessarily have done anything different.
Yeah, and that is tragedy in some ways because, it's kind of like choice doesn't matter, and there isn't an alternative path for people, which is really hard because it sort of reminds me of like Ben Solo redeemed but still ended up dying, you know?
Well, but there's a difference here because Ben Solo was completely redeemed, and so it was unnecessary for him to die. This is different. Again, Sol never acknowledged or atoned. He didn't. And Osha had no prior knowledge in order to come to terms with it and deal with it on her own.
No, that's fair. It's also just like, it's sad when it happens.
Well, it comes across almost like a Romeo and Juliet thing.
Yeah.
Like, and not in the romance sense, but in terms of how their tragedy plays out. Like, if you understand how, the tragedy of Romeo and Juliet occurs, like just from a plot perspective, it's everything that can go wrong does go wrong. And it puts them on this path to ultimately the only possible outcome is that they die. Right. And this is very similar in that there were moments that things could have gone differently, but the way that it happened, it sets them on this path to this ultimate confrontation that could not have turned out any other way.
He kept on delaying actually telling people the truth, right? Which I will do this. Oh yeah, when? You have to after or later, and then like the fate, the force, whatever, intervene to say, well, you didn't have that opportunity, you missed that opportunity, which is a good sign to say when you have the opportunity to do the right thing, you probably should.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So as much as I know that we say that like, oh, this isn't a cautionary tale, it's not a cautionary tale about the dark side or the romance or any of the things that we would normally expect it to do. It is a cautionary tale about destructive, oppressive systems. And we'll get into this, but that is what this story is about. That is what it is critical of. That is what it is warning us about, is these consumptive systems that will destroy everything in their path. And
institutions that promote the dominator culture of destruction.
And keep that. We've talked about this already. The Jedi is a patriarchal order. And especially in this season, we see that the Jedi are the dominant power. And so what that means is that when they become corrupt, it destroys everything.
Yep. And that ties to another theme that we'll get to in a bit.
This is just so important because that's really ultimately what this story is saying. And our main characters, our protagonists, they are casualties of this. And I just really think that's important. There's an article that I saw today, actually, that said that for the first time in recorded sociological history, young people 30 and younger, are having more of a mental health crisis than middle-aged people. It used to always be like the midlife crisis was the reliable time where people would sort of, oh my gosh, what do I do with myself? And people make bad choices and they just get very depressed and erratic and everything. And that has shifted to about 20 years earlier. And it's now very young people who are experiencing that. And apparently it's very, very bad. And they dated it to about, they said it starts about 2011 and then it picks up pace about 2017. And obviously then, COVID and everything else made it worse. And so it's really a problem right now. And I would argue a lot of that, is because young people sense that their elders have really consumed everything and destroyed the world they live in. And it sucks.
And what's the hope when in that?
So this story reflects that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a lens you have to look at it through if you're going to understand it. All right. So moving on to a related motif. We've talked throughout this entire series about Bluebeard and how originally Qimir was the predator. Then we mentioned that Sol was leaning into being the predator. And so given where we ended up with this story, who was our predator at the end of the story? And what does it mean? Is it still Bluebeard? Is it something else? It's actually a Bluebeard variation that we see in this episode. This variation is called the Robber Bridegroom, named after a Grimm fairy tale. And what this is that it's similar to Bluebeard in that the bride discovers her husband is a predator of maidens. But in this version, she actually sees him killing, dismembering, or eating another woman. She ends up taking evidence with her from the scene. Typically, it's an object like a ring. And sometimes it's even a body part. Like sometimes she has a finger with a ring on it and she'll take that with her. And then later, in the presence of others, she will confront him. She reveals the evidence of his crime in front of authorities, and then he's executed. So this is a common variation. And we see that happening in this episode. So Sol and the Jedi Order is Bluebeard. He's already sacrificed one sister, and he would absolutely consume the other one too if he could, if it would allow him to prove the virgins. I even said you could even count 3 sisters if you include Jecki, since she was also his Padawan and sort of bride of the Jedi, if you will. May witnesses his killing of her mother, and then later in this episode goads Sol into admitting it in front of Osha, who enters the courtyard through a door, just like the bride entering the cellar to find the dead brides of Bluebeard. And then Osha picks up the lightsaber, which is the weapon that killed her mother. So it's the evidence of the crime after hearing his admission. And then when Sol turns to her, she kills him. I want to point out also that we've talked about how a sheathed lightsaber is yonic, and that's like the ring of the fairy tale, also yonic. So very much we saw this happening. I want to also point out that there is a specific version of this tale type that actually includes the saber, and I wanted to call that out. So there's a story, it's a French Basque tale in which the heroine is the 3rd sister to be given to the predator in marriage. She uses the key to open the cellar, finds the bodies of his victims there. But she also finds her sisters and a young man still alive but forced to eat human flesh.
Oh,
and in this room, I know. And in this room, she also finds a saber. She takes it with her. When her husband then accuses her of entering the room, she cuts off his head. And then she frees her sisters and marries the young man.
Okay. That's great.
It is literally what happened in this story.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
It's exactly what happened in this story. So, and if you're wondering what all of that means, like, yes, it's the predator, but what it is it's a few things. One, it is a more active heroine. Typically in a normal Bluebeard tale, you would have her just pleading for help at the end, and then someone shows up in the nick of time to rescue her. But in this one, she is very active and she has a plan.
Self-rescues.
Right, self-rescue. So that's really big. There's, like I said, there's the confronting the predator with the evidence of his crime. It's putting him on the back foot. It's saying, like, no, you did this. It's holding him accountable. So it's really important because it is this open acknowledgement of what the predator did and what he is responsible for.
And just as a reminder, like Bluebeard is all about keeping us in naivety and keeping us controlled. And Bluebeard is representative of a psychological predator that drains our energy and tells us we need to only be good girls or good people, and we can't rebel against things we know are wrong. But I like this version of the tale because it's not only about agency, it's also about our own desires too.
Yes. Yes. Well, and that's the thing too. The outcome of this one is she rescues her sisters, and then she, rescues also the young man, and then, ends up marrying him. And the whole idea is that she goes from that, to your point, that dark union to to the alchemical union.
A divine union, alchemical union,
right?
A union that is more fulfilling for her. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But I also really love the detail of like that the sisters and the young man were alive, but they were just forced to eat human flesh to survive, because that to me is what he did to May, and what the Jedi did to Qimir, is that they were forced to the margins.
Yeah, and self-consumption is something that people do in sort of these drastic situations where you are forced out of into full survival mode. We talked about that with the vixen archetype, in that it's a survival archetype. And do we blame any of the victims in this story for doing what they needed to do? No.
Yep. Yeah. And that's key too, because this story plays a lot with our understanding of dark and light and good and evil and everything. And it's the characters do bad things, but they're not bad people. And they are still the protagonists, and we still root for them, and we still want to see them succeed, even on their own terms, even on terms which we know put them on the dark side of the force. We're still like, but we want you to be okay. We want you to be together. We want you to be, like, so that's
maybe we want you to
here.
find a third alternative than to being a Sith. Yeah.
Right. So this story is really forcing us to think. We can't accept the simple binaries in this story. It does not work.
It's a more advanced story for a less civilized age.
I like what you did there. And so now I want to go into my last thing from my notes. And I'm sorry, I know I'm yammering on for a while here, but this is huge. I'm so excited about this. So one of the things that I've been tracking for a while in this story is the hunter-huntress motifs. Because obviously you had May hunting for a while, the predator, you had Qimir hunting, Soul hunting, and then eventually Osha as well hunting. And so all of these characters have been the hunter-huntress at one point or another. And this is a huge motif across all mythology. You see it over and over again. It's very common through tons and tons of stories. And one of the things I was trying to figure out after finishing this episode was, is there an example of a story, now that we know that these two are lovers mythically, is there an example of, instead of a animal husband being transformed into the human lover, or the animal bride being transformed, or only one being transformed and then they're separated because they can't be together? Is there an example of both remaining in their beastly form or transforming into a beastly form and being together? And the only tale that I could find that fit that is the myth of Atalanta. So this is a Greek myth, and this one is best known for a famous foot race. So Atalanta was a Greek huntress. She was a companion and avatar of Artemis, and she refused to marry any man but the one who could best her in a foot race. And with the help of Aphrodite and 3 golden apples, which I will get into in a minute, the hero Hippomenes triumphs and wins her hand. So he beats her in a foot race. Now, I said the 3 golden apples. Specifically in this case, he throws them. So Atalanta is much faster than anyone else. A number of men come to take this challenge before Hippomenes, and she kills them all because they don't beat her in this race. So he knows he needs help. He goes to Aphrodite, asks for help. She gives him these 3 golden apples and tells him to throw them while he's in the foot race. So every time Atalanta pulls ahead during the race, he throws the apple. And then she runs off to go grab it. And then he gets ahead. And then eventually she catches up and he has to throw the next one. And eventually he throws all 3 apples and he barely squeaks over the finish line before her. And so these are the thrown objects in fairy tales, which is very common. They, one of 2 things will happen. Either it's a situation like this where they're going to throw the objects because you need to slow down the person that you're chasing, right? Or it's the other way around. You're the one being chased and you throw the objects behind you
to slow them down.
Yeah, to slow them down. So it's either, you are either the hunter or the hunted, but either way, you're using these thrown objects to even the odds. That's what these do. And the reason this is important is because Atalanta actually means balance, equal. The reason she sets this challenge is because she wants an equal mate. She wants to be total. And keep in mind, this is in a society that was not equal in terms of gender. And so this is very important. So they get married, or sometimes they're just lovers, either way. But they go off together hunting happily, and then they have sex on sacred ground or in a temple, and they make the gods mad. And so for this transgression, the gods transform them into lions. Now, throughout most of history, this is interpreted as a tragic ending. But recently, a lot of feminist authors have started to point out that this is actually more of a happily ever after for the couple, because now they can be together, they can love each other outside of the society that rejected them.
Right. That would require them to not be equals too.
Right. That would not allow them to be equals. That would not allow them to be together. That for whatever reason would deny them this love that they have. And so this is Qimir.
Yay!
Osha and Qimir.
Mythic parallel. Yay.
Woohoo! So now that they are together, they are able to love each other freely on the dark side. They're away from that rigid asceticism of the Jedi Order, and that would forbid their emotion. It would label them both as beasts. In particular, the episode Teach Corrupt, which is their most shippy episode, that actually is the foot race, basically, because it includes the thrown objects. In order to basically catch Osha,
catch her off guard in some ways, or take down her defenses.
Right.
Yeah.
He lays things aside for her to find.
Clothes, lightsaber, food, helmet.
The helmet, right. And as she takes up each of these things, they become more and more equals.
Oh, it's perfect. It
is perfect.
Missy,
I love it so much.
I love it when you teach me stuff, because I knew about this myth, but I didn't know about the thrown object aspect of it, which totally makes sense, which is like, he's probably not as fast as her or as strong as her, but he can still teach her in his wily way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
I love it too. So yay.
Now I need them drawn as lions. Thank you.
Yes. Someone please draw them as lions. We appreciate that. Yes. So what I said about what this does is that it allows this couple to love one another outside of the society that rejects them. So there's a quote from Leslie where she's talking about writing the dialogue for Manny Jacinto for episode 5. So this is, of course, that's his big predator moment, right? And he's responding to Soul when Soul's like, I can't believe you killed everyone. And he's explaining that, it's just survival, like, what do you want? I just want to be free, freedom. So she's writing this dialogue and she's struggling to figure out what to have him say. This is the quote from the article that Leslie says. She said, and again, Manny was giving this incredible performance all through this. So I'm like, how do I live up to this performance? And my wife was like, well, what do you want to say? And I was like, I want to say that people don't want me to exist as a gay woman, as a woman in this particular space, working in this wild sandbox. There was a whole crew of people who believed in me, but deep down, I felt like I am unaccepted for who I am because of what I believe in and wanting to wield my power the way I'd like without having to answer to the legion of people that just exist out there. End quote.
Perfect.
So
I love
my
you,
point,
Leslie.
I love her too. And my point here, she talks about how she relates to the stranger, to Qimir. And so that to me is why this dark side romance exists, is because this is saying, I can have what I desire, but I can only do it outside of these oppressive, dominant systems.
And it's one of the reasons why we have been primarily looking at a comparison between patriarchal mythic motifs and non-patriarchal mythic motifs. Because we need to talk about both to be able to understand this story, because it is comparing and contrasting both.
Yep. Yeah. So
wow.
I just love it. I'm sorry. I get very emotional.
So am I. I'm really verklempt. I actually almost teared up when you were reading this out loud, because it's personal, right? It's personal to us who are the listeners, who we know that, Manny talked about he wanted to do part of this for the Raylos, the people out there that love romance, and he wanted to do a good job for us. Like, this is for us, me and you, Missy. It's for our listeners. It's for people who care about story and symbolism and characterization and love Star Wars and want to see it be the best it can be.
Yes, I love it. And it makes me think of what we talked about, how why does George Lucas Star Wars hit so hard? Because it was personal to him. He was telling stories that were personal to him, that were about him and his life and his experience and his perspective. And we talked about this with Willow, the way John Kasdan wrote a personal story that was about him and his experience and his life. And
now we have it here.
Yes. And now Leslie has given us that as well. This beautiful personal story that means something to her. And because it means something to her, it means something to all of us. And I am going to start crying. I need to get a grip.
No, it's okay. We love it. And you and I got really, really into Willow, and we discovered so much about George Lucas through the lens of Willow, and we discovered so much about John Kasdan through the lens of Willow, and now we're discovering so much about Leslie. And I think that that's what great art does. It connects you to a creator in some ways, because you're getting to learn their truth.
And that's so brave to put yourself out there like that in your art. That's such a brave thing to do.
It really is. And I don't know, we've said it a lot, but I love you, Leslie.
Yes, we do. Love you very much.
And all the creators, there's been so many amazing Black women creators as well involved in this show. And I feel a lot of love and gratitude towards all of the Lucasfilm employees that have worked on the show and who have supported it, and made it become a reality. Okay, on to goddesses, because we have several goddess reveal moments in this. And so, just as a reminder, when you're talking about the great goddess motif, all women are goddesses.
Yeah.
That is the truth. Campbell talks about it. Maureen Murdoch talks about it. Marie-Louise Van Franz talks about it. Our lovely Clarissa Piccola Estes, PhD, talks about it. She talks about it in the fact that they are all the great old wild woman. We're all this very powerful femme creation power, right? So all women, all femme identifying people, goddesses. Okay.
The Estes view of it also, though, in that she has the wild woman, is she leans very hard into including the destructive aspect along with the creative aspect, that they cannot be separated, that we all have the life, death, life, nature inside of us. And that's very important to her.
But so does Campbell.
Of goddesses. Yes.
Campbell actually talks about it in a way that says you cannot separate the goddess who destroys from the goddess who creates. and
Yes.
the temptress that you might see in the woods one day.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So they all exist, right, in the same person. You just might only see one aspect of her.
Yes.
And so we actually have a double goddess moments multiple times in this episode. And that, of course, ties very well to May and Osha being double goddesses. And I want to bring up one piece, and let me just... Demeter and Persephone used to be the same goddess.
Mm-hmm.
And then over time, they actually split apart and took on different roles. One was a transformational goddess that came back and forth from the underworld, and the other was just the goddess of nature.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so it's important to recognize that sometimes like an idea might start out as only one idea and then actually separated out into two different unique ideas that can never actually be reconciled again because they have changed so much. And I think that this ties to Osha and May because they're never coming back together to be one person.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's also a deep amount of Persephone motifs that are happening throughout the episode, but I'm just going to call them out when we get to them, when we get through the episodes. There's also Inanna and Ereshkigal, and this specifically is tied to the idea that when you actually go into the deep dark and you meet the death goddess within, you find out that she's actually you. And that's what's happening with Inanna and Ereshkigal because they're sisters. But I will dig into what's happening in that moment when that happens later on. But goddesses are an important motif in that for all the other things that we've talked about, but especially the idea of dual nature paired goddesses, like what we were just talking about. I want to talk about the Sick King / Fisher King briefly. We've talked about this throughout this. This is also tied to the House of Atreus. But when you get into the hero's arc, you end up getting a whole new set of antagonists that come up. And so I sort of speculated on this on my Patreon the other day, but I wanted to talk about how the Sick King is actually the main antagonist who represents the poisoned or sick kingdom. The Sick King is actually sometimes connected to the dragon that the hero wants to go and fight as well, because the dragon is actually usually an outcome of the fact that the Sick King has existed, and so it is the greed of the sick country kingdom coming to fruition and sort of forming into a specter or a giant thing that must fight. So who is the first dragon we ever see in Star Wars? Well, it's actually the Death Star. And Luke goes and blows that sucker up.
Yeah.
But to May and Osha, the dragon that they're going to be facing in the future, and we actually start to see the formation of it in this episode because of where especially Osha is in her journey, is the Jedi. And if the curse is not lifted on the Sick King, then the Sick King himself will become the dragon. So I think it's really important to bring that up. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up, which is Shihai Springs Hannah actually asked me this on Twitter when I was in Disney World, and I didn't have enough time to think about it to be like, okay, what is happening with this fairy tale and is it actually a parallel? But she asked me if I felt like there was enough of a parallel between Snow White and Red Rose, which is not the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs that you're thinking of. Probably, if you're not familiar with this one. But it is a Grimm's fairy tale where there are two sisters who live in the woods with their mother. And one night, a bear comes wandering in and he seems threatening, but they end up treating him with kindness and taking care of him. And he returns every once in a while and becomes friends with them. And then one day when the bear has left for, the week or whatever, a dwarf shows up and he's angry and he gets stuck in something. And so they rescue him. And after running into the dwarf multiple times and rescuing him from a variety of situations, he's never thankful. And he is always trying to he's very rude and angry with them. then they run across him one day, and either a prince is there who has realized that the dwarf has stolen his gold and he goes after him, or the dwarf is just running around with gold. The bear comes and approaches, and the dwarf tries to convince the bear to attack the young girls so that he can keep his gold. But the bear actually turns and attacks the dwarf. And when the dwarf is killed, he drops the gold. The bear turns back into a prince, and suddenly, the girls meet with the prince's brother, and they all get married, and they're all happy in the end. Okay, sorry. That was a very messy explanation of Snow White and Red Rose, but
it's Rose Red, just to be clear.
Oh, sorry,
Snow White and Rose Red. That's all right. No worries.
I'm just reading it wrong in my page.
Totally okay.
But the idea is that Rose Red and Snow White are actually opposites. So Rose Red is outspoken, lively, cheerful, whereas Snow White is, not sort of unassuming and calm and patient and things like that. The bear is under a curse and seems like somebody you shouldn't trust, whereas the dwarf seems like a kindly old dwarf, but actually turns out to be greedy and somebody you couldn't trust. And this ties to both Qimir and to Soul, in that the people that you think you should trust aren't the ones that actually appear to be the people that you need to trust. And the dual nature of the feminine, in that you have both in this story, and that the angry dwarf is still greedy. Soul wants the power of the virgins, or at least to prove it to the Jedi that it exists. He desires it, and he is greedy in the end, and it puts the girls at risk. And the bear, the cursed prince, although scary, doesn't end up actually hurting them. Okay, so yeah, that's the parallel, and I totally see it, and I agree. So
yeah,
yay!
I think it's legit. I love it. I'm so glad that she called that out. That's wonderful.
All right. Are there any archetypes that we want to talk about, or do we want to talk about them through the episodes?
I think I'm happy to talk about them throughout the episode. I again, the thing about this is everything in this story is based on perspective. Whether you take the perspective of a character, or maybe of an opposing character, or whether you are interested in the perspective of the creator as described in her interviews, or whether you take the perspective of a fan and maybe your experience of fandom is different than others. We talked about this in our nostalgia episode, that everyone's Star Wars homeland is a little bit different. And so what that means is that you bring something different to every Star Wars story. And so because of that, the archetypes that these characters occupy is different depending on the perspective that you look at it from. So I think that's really important to call out as we go through. And this story is playing on that a lot. We know that it used that Rashomon effect, right? And that it would change perspectives throughout the story to change your impression of the events and the characters. And that's definitely what is happening in this episode, because we have our protagonists who are occupying a position that is on the dark side, that is considered evil, that have done things that are wrong and harmful, and yet they are still our protagonists. And then conversely, you have the Jedi who occupy the light side doing terrible things, and we're supposed to view that as bad.
Yeah.
And so this is very important. So as we go through the episode, I'm really looking forward to calling out the way that perspective can change how we view all the actions, and the way that there's a lot of duality to their actions as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of they can be both, and the text actually calls it out, which is beautiful. But, like all good Star Wars, it very much depends on a certain point of view.
Yeah.
Let's dig into episode 8, The Acolyte.
Yes, which weirdly they didn't release the title until like several hours after the episode dropped.
Yeah. Let's discuss at the end who the Acolyte is. opens on Osha in the mask, and we see Qimir kind of smirk as he sees her in the mask, but then it immediately changes to utter panic as he sees her like struggling to breathe almost, and like her head gets like all, you know, like hipped up, and
she's like gasping and twitching. It's like something's very wrong.
Yeah. And he approaches her and tries to like, seems to take off the mask, but gets caught, and she's caught in her power. And he yells, "No!" And then we're kind of like cut between, we see him on the outside and we see him cut in like this sort of shadow world that are known to hit her mother's powers, right? So being able to keep him in this like shadow world, which I love.
Yep.
And to me, this is a dark goddess moment. This is him actually seeing the full potentiality of her power. They're underground. They're in a cave. It's moist. She is. To me, this is like the idea of what the witch's powers, and this is of course me speculating, but people who have eaten their shadows have all of the energy and power of all of that darkness. So if you have owned all of your darkness, then you have the power of it, and thus it is raw and natural to you. And to me, their shadow powers of being able to kind of move via shadow or to put people into shadows is much like what men fear women can do, because they're more connected with their own darkness. And I think that that's what's happening symbolically, which I love so much. And it doesn't need rules. It doesn't need power stats. It is magic.
And it speaks to the darkness that she's capable of, because we've seen him do truly horrible things at this point, and yet he is terrified in this moment.
Yes. And we've also seen what has happened to others who have experienced this darkness. And will he be the same, where like Torben had to go and like hide himself away in a trance, or Kelnaka went onto the edge of society and wanted to live in the woods? It's a very, very scary thing to come in contact with a dark goddess like Ereshkigal or even Persephone. So Osha sees something in her vision. It is not what maybe we thought as the viewer she might see, which is the truth of the night. She actually sees, so maybe it was just a moment, she sees what she says is the future. She sees May, and she is killing Soul with a saber in her hand. And there is a moment when the helmet comes off, when Qimir breaks free of her power and is able to pull off the helmet, where you see in her eyes, and I've seen the screenshots, a red glow of a red lightsaber in her eyes.
Yeah. It's cool, because the first time I watched it, I was like, did she have Sith eyes? And then the second time I was like, oh no, it's the lightsaber.
It is the lightsaber. So cool. And later on, we see that moment. And so this is what I'm talking about. Whereas you see this vision of the dark goddess in your dreams, it's almost like a portent. This is what's going to happen. You're going to descend into the underworld and meet this scary dark goddess, and you're going to go and stop her, comfort her in Anna's case. But in the truth, you discover the dark goddess is you. We have Qimir who wants to go after her, or she wants to go after May. We can stop her. And he's like, with what ship? I'm taking mine. And then she immediately banters with him and go where? I've seen where they are. So we go together and see who gets to her first. Yes.
I'm into them, like bantering like an old married couple. I love it. Yes, here for it.
And again, this is tying to him being the lover, so he's willing to go along with her on her journey and be supportive. I don't even think he was really willing to stand in her way. He's just trying to get some dignity. He doesn't
stand his ground for any amount of time whatsoever. He's just like, okay.
I loved him kneeling in front of her. Let's do more of that.
That was pretty great too. I agree.
But we cut to Soul and May. May is still bound up in the ship from the last time we saw her. I guess they have been having a talk about what really happened on Brendock. And he's monologuing like a villain.
He is. And also, okay, this is the point where I want to call something out. So I saw a joke earlier today where someone misunderstood the word virgins.
Okay, this is from Reddit.
And was like, why is Soul so obsessed with the girls being virgins? And like, on the one hand, yes, that's hilarious. And on the other hand, we've talked about how he is very preoccupied with the idea, particularly Osha, of like her purity. And he keeps making this thing about like, you know, May is tainted, but Osha is good and
Pure,
we have to save her and this whole thing, right? And so, and given the way that, especially bringing in the dragon theme this episode.
Virgins and dragons.
Yeah, virgins and dragons. So I just want to be clear that like, while Virgins is an established piece of Star Wars lore, and that obviously they're calling on that and everything, I don't think it hurts that it is actually a homophone for virgin. I do think it helps a little.
It kind of makes sense when he's like, oh my God, they're going to sacrifice the virgins.
Yeah. So funny.
Like this is from like, you know, like episode 7. Like he's just like so concerned that they were going to go and be thrown into that hole. Like,
I know. He was like, what's going to happen? We have to save them.
We have to save the virgins.
I know.
Virgins.
Virgins.
It's so.
Listen, I love when Star Wars makes us talk about sex. It's my favorite thing. Anyway.
Yeah. And then he's like, what happened to your coven was an accident. You started the fire.
And you know, actually, what's really sad is this is the moment that I realized he wasn't going to get healed.
Yeah.
Right. When he said that, I was like,
in denial.
I know. I was like, damn it, Saul.
I was like, damn it, Saul. If you, I thought you were going to admit you were wrong and you were going to make everything right and you were going to try.
Yep.
No. He was like, no. And
he was going to double down.
Yeah. And I talked about this on Patreon about how the naive father is blinded to the patriarchy and oftentimes it causes their own downfall. And how in so many ways they have to wake up. And oh my gosh, like, okay.
Yeah. And that's literally it. It goes back to this idea of this show is not saying, hey, Saul was a bad guy. Like even Vernestra says at the end of the, you know, he was compassionate and kind and all these other things. And these are all true. These are true about Saul. What this story is about the system and the oppressive system that he was part of that caused him to make these terrible choices and then double down on them to the bitter end. And that's just
how hard it is to break free from the systems that we have in place. Wow, it feels like this is a very important story for our day and age.
Very prescient, yes.
And he doubles down so hard with it was right for us to intervene.
Oh, it hurts so much when he said that. Oh, dude. No.
Right? So he agrees with things. He is like, no. This is the Jedi way. It was right for us, not just him. Like he's taking away any sort of accountability on his own part for this. My biggest regret was that I wasn't able to save you both. The virgins.
Yeah. The virgins.
I mean, yeah. Right. But you get it. Like he regrets the individual deaths or he regrets like the pain he caused the person in front of him, not all the deaths around him, not the destruction of the coven, not anything.
Yeah.
You know?
No. That's just all incidental as far as he's concerned.
And then he tries to explain that you're not even sisters, and May has broken free with Pip's help and tases him.
Yeah. And by the way, again, left side of the chest,
right?
His heart. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So that's the Fisher King motif again.
Yep.
Coming out, which is of course Sick King. Oh man.
Yeah, it's all there. It's all there. And so then, and keep in mind at this point now, Pip, because his allegiance has changed, he is sort of her animal familiar in a sense.
Yes.
That's his role.
Yeah.
And so he unlocks her binds. And this is like in stories, a lot of times there will be a mouse or a snake or something that will actually like gnaw through the bindings to release the maiden or whatever.
Yeah.
This
or
is very common.
Animals in general, like the big Snow Whites and the animals that help her. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So that's his role. And so then, he chases her through the ship. She gets to the escape ship. It's not escape pod, escape ship.
Like a
very
shuttle
interesting.
or like a little like
a
fighter.
Shuttle.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So she gets there and she turns around and has this amazing line, "See you in hell, Jedi." Oh, it's so great.
And people who are upset about this, go back to Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, it's a Han Solo line.
Did it first.
Yeah.
Then I'll see you in hell on his tauntaun.
I love that part. I've always loved that part. Who cares if there's not a canonical hell in Star Wars? It's a great line.
There's a hell somewhere in somebody's mythology. Come on.
Listen, there's got to be a hell because Palpatine is there until we're able to get Sheev-Demption. Okay? So
just working on
kidding.
It.
I'm kidding.
It's more like purgatory, I assume.
It's fine.
So it's chasing, like we always see in a maiden arc, right? With the predator or authority going after her. In this case, it is Soul who represents both. Woo, they head towards the moons. And in between two fields of rings around the moon,
she goes into the ring of safety. So again, to go back to last episode where we talked about the handless maiden and about how she stands in the safety of the ring to be protected from the devil who is coming after her. Like this is what she's doing. And she even says that he can't follow us in here. Like she's safe within the rings. And and this is, remember, between the two moons that we always see there's a red moon, there's a ringed moon, and she is symbolically, she's the ringed moon.
She is the ringed moon. And so she is in between this ring of safety. And Basil takes the opportunity to sabotage Soul. Okay. Who are you working for, Basil?
Okay, so here's the thing. So Basil, he is a tracker. And as such, he functions on wild instinct.
Okay, I get it. He goes with his vibes and he is always acting against whoever he believes to be intuitively to be wrong in the moment.
Yes, exactly. Okay. It doesn't matter that he acted against May in the previous episode or the last 2 episodes ago. He now is acting against Soul because he recognizes, he senses that Soul now has become the predator. So he is acting defensively based on his wild instinct. And for May, this would actually be her defensive wild instinct. Technically speaking, it's an expression of her instinct. It is protecting her.
I love how she says, "Brace yourself, Pip." And literally my husband and my kids were like, "How?
With what?"
With what? How? He has no arms.
But it's so cute.
Pip, it is cute. And thus sort of proving like how he has taken on this animal companion of May now instead of Osha, is that like she now cares for him the way that Osha did. And so she is kind of in this like connected to droids. And to me, people who have good relationships with droids are usually
they must be okay.
They're on a balanced path. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too,
indicator.
Is that prior to this, she was very lonely. And so her having Pip is really important to her growth because then she's not alone and she has someone with her who protects her and defends her and cares for her, and she can do the same for them. And so it is really important. But yeah, so then she's knocked out of orbit and the shuttle catches fire on reentry. Keep in mind, this is May's motif. Fire is her motif. So we see that as she comes back in. Also, I want to mention the other thing about the See You in Hell Jedi is it's also prophetic because they're headed to the underworld.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a question, which is why Soul is so obsessed with being right about the twins. But I think that we kind of already answered that in that he is unable to break himself out of the institution and the logic that he is part of.
I actually think it even goes deeper than that. Again, he joined the Jedi Order when he was 4.
Right.
When he was 4. So we know that on some level he's psychologically very damaged. And this is why he acts out in the way that he does at all times.
He doesn't know what life is, and he was indoctrinated into a way of thinking.
And on some level, he does actually know that it was wrong. But the only way that he can reconcile that to himself is by proving that the Jedi were right, and that requires him to find the virgins.
Mm-hmm.
Like he has to believe in the Jedi, in the vision of the Jedi, in the goodness and the righteousness of the Jedi. And the only way that and if the Jedi are good and righteous, then he's good and righteous. And the only way he can continue believing that, is to, find what they came for in the first place. And especially once both girls are alive and it's nearly in his grasp, the temptation is overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When he believes only Osha is alive, he's willing to let that go. And he's able to be much more caring and, see her as an individual. But once they're both alive, he is so desperate to feel justified in what he did.
Yeah, because in some ways, we end up being in denial about the bad parts of ourselves because we don't want to look at them, right? And that ends up becoming our own shadow. And that's why he's unbalanced, and that's why he is sort of this predatory person, because he's absolutely in denial of his own darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And in some ways Qimir was right in that episode.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He's I've accepted my darkness. Well, not really, but
not as
much as Soul has been in denial, certainly.
Oh, Soul's in total denial. And it also speaks to something that is true in reality, which is that it's harder to realize that you were wrong about something the older you are and the longer you hold that position. Right. It's really hard, because when you acknowledge that you were wrong about something, you have to acknowledge how much harm you've done potentially in the intervening time that it took you to realize that. And that's why people will double down and find any reason, any confirmation bias, whatever, to continue believing that they are right. And they will twist facts and reality to continue believing that they're right, because everyone wants to believe that they're a good person, and everyone wants to believe that they can't be fooled, because it hurts to realize that we've been fooled, especially by things, that we trust. And I'm actually excited because the scene immediately after this talks about this, but
textually it tells us answers.
It tells us exactly. Yeah. So it's important because Soul kind of represents this person. We talked about the generational thing happening in this episode, about how the younger generation actually realizes that the elder generation is corrupt and they break away from their systems. And in this, we see how the system has that older generation trapped, because you'd have to reject the whole thing. You'd have to reject it wholesale and admit that you were wrong for a very long time and did bad things in service of this corrupt system. And that's a very hard thing to do.
Yep. And a lot of people would just rather let the bad system exist.
Yep. Yeah.
So back on Coruscant, we have Mog letting Vernestra know that Senator Raincourt is here for you, played by David Hardwood.
Yeah, Harwood. I was so excited to see him.
Yeah. And she's like, you let him in the control room?
And Mog's like,
like, my paperwork's in there. The fact that I'm looking for Soul is in there. Like, it's so funny. Vern uses the Force the way I would, picking up lost socks of my youngest, flipping up light switches, like quite literally closing the fridge when somebody's left it open across the kitchen. I love her for this. This is so real. You're so real for this. And he goes in and says, I heard you were traveling or away. How is your stomach? It's my head, actually. I'm fine.
Yeah.
I sort of love that everybody knows that she hates traveling. And so the fact that she was out and about in hyperspace means something is
Something big was going down. Yeah, for sure.
Suspicious is happening. And so he's like, he cuts straight to the point and says, I heard you were conducting a murder and investigation. And goes into, and she's like, well, it's, the incident, it's all within our control. And, I'm paraphrasing, but she denies, right? She tries to set him off. And he just gets straight to the point and says, you think that this is personal, but I think that the Jedi are a massive system of unchecked power posing as a religion, a delusional cult that claims to control the uncontrollable. And she says, we don't control the Force. And he counters with, no, your emotions. Yeah.
Yep. You project an image of goodness and restraint, but it's only a matter of time before one of you snaps. And when, not if, that happens, who will be strong enough to stop him?
Okay. So when you hear the word snap, did you hear the musical notes?
I didn't. I'm not as good at paying attention to that as you are, but I bet it was amazing.
So I thought it was going to be the Imperial March, but it wasn't. It was Kylo's theme again.
Oh my gosh.
So I think because Qimir is associated with Vernestra, this is specifically calling out that Qimir snapped previously.
Yep. Yes.
Okay, so I thought this was going to be like, oh, Anakin, right? We would have heard the Imperial March if it was like crazy foreshadowing that.
Marie Claire, do you know what else snaps? A whip.
Yeah! Ah! Oh my God, we solved Star Wars. Sorry. No. So Qimir is associated with Kylo Ren's theme because we think maybe there's going to be something to do with the Knights of Ren eventually. Okay.
Yep.
But Vernestra is probably the reason he snapped. And thus the whip and the whip marks on his back. Oh my God. Yeah. I was like, wow, that's a weird play. What does this mean? Oh, I know what it means.
Oh, this is so fun.
This is great. Yep.
But he says, when you're looking up to heroes, you don't have to face what's right in front of you. And that gets back to what we were just talking about is that like everyone's looking at the Jedi as these wonderful heroes, and even the Jedi see themselves as heroes and all this other stuff. And so what he's saying, when you don't look at what's right in front of you, you don't have to take accountability and you don't have to ask accountability. And this is where, again, the Jedi are being very explicitly associated with cops.
Yep.
This is another all Jedi are bad Jedi, basically, that is in this show. It's very, very explicit. And I know it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but that's really the point. Yep. The point is that, and they go into this later in an amazing way, the whole like lone wolf, one bad apple, blah, blah, blah kind of concept. And, whether that reflects on the system or not. But the point is, the system is corrupt. The people participating in it are participating in the corruption, and you're not demanding accountability from them because we have to view them as heroes and as good, and we need them, and without them it would be chaos.
And we can't grow and change without being uncomfortable.
Yep.
So the message is important. And then he does the most badass thing I've ever seen.
Yes.
He says, may the Force be with you, or whatever you say. May the Force be with you, as an insult.
Sarcastically. I tried to think, have we ever heard that said sarcastically anywhere else in all of Star Wars? Even Han Solo took it seriously when he said it out loud.
Yeah, he was cautious about it, but he was like, may the
he
Force
felt
be
kind
with
of
you,
weird.
Kid.
Yeah, he felt kind of weird saying it, but he meant it. But this guy was like, good luck. Yeah.
I love you.
I love it. He was wonderful. I loved him.
Who would have thought you and I would love a senator character?
Yeah.
In Star Wars.
He shows up for a few minutes of screen time and absolutely chews up everything.
Yeah.
I loved it.
So much gravitas.
Yeah.
We cut back to Unknown Planet.
Yep.
unknown snuggle shack.
Cute little Skura family in the foreground.
Yeah, and they're like eating like ants or bugs in the rocks or something. Mm-hmm. And the little baby is on the back of one of them. And I was like, wait, they're eating the ants? Is that meta?
Antis, suck it!
Anyway, so Osha and Qimir are like getting ready to go, and she's like, or he's like, you're really not going to tell us where we're going? And she's like, we go together or we don't go at all. That's fair. Did I ever give you the impression I was fair? And she goes into like listing off how fair he's actually been, even though he's been kind of a nightmare. Yeah. And, you were fair to my sister. You made a fair deal. It was all good. And then he stops her and is like, you really should be trained. I call this the beach proposal. And Osha like smirks at him and says, no. And
no, but he specifically says, would you ever consider? But he doesn't finish. He just stops at consider. So it's like, would you ever consider me?
Like, and she's like,
so
no, cute. In all her confidence. And so this is really an important moment because heroes are so defined by their confidence in their new powers and their self-assured nature. So you think back to New Hope when Biggs and Luke are like, I think I can take on the whole empire myself.
Right.
Like they're just so confident until they actually are faced with the realities of what everything actually looks like. But she's super confident in her no. And he's like, last chance. And she says, no, not last chance. He would give her a million chances. But I told you I'm not like my sister.
All right. No, he says, I'm not my sister. And he goes, you're definitely not.
Yeah. May made that deal without even thinking about it.
Which is the bargain without knowledge. Okay. So, yes. But it's amazing because it's so seductive. And I just think it's absolutely hilarious that he said last chance as if any of us would take him seriously about that.
No, he's coming
back. She could come back to him a day or a month and he would take her in a minute.
He loves that girl. He loves her. And it's also sort of confirming that he doesn't see them as the same person from a Manaway myth perspective. He's learning their different names. It's really, 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 really important that he is different than, especially Soul, who mix them up regularly.
Right. And all the way to the end continues to insist that they are not separate people. They're the
same person because it makes it easier on him if he only, did this to one person.
Yep. Exactly. And then who's creeping around?
Then we pan back, and this pan back was so good. I'm like, why are we going into the cave? This is
I was wondering the same thing. I was like, what's this about?
Back, and it's like we enter the cave, and then we see the shadowy figure.
Creepy spider fingers come around the corner.
Creepy hands, and he looks all floaty and gross. And we hear the guttural choral in the background, which is like the which is
it's so creepy.
Sort of a creepier version of Palpatine's teachings or Snoke's theme, which also use deep male choral. Okay, let's talk about this for a moment. So there was this giant black hole I pointed out above the bed.
Yeah, what was that about?
It's like a tunnel.
It kind of was.
And in the most dropout game changer way, we get to actually say Plagueis was here the whole time.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Although I do have a theory that maybe Qimir isn't actually the apprentice, but just one of the acolytes of Plagueis.
It's possible. Because I think it's possible that he doesn't take apprentices.
Like, he's actually the apprentice at this point.
Yeah.
And that Plagueis is expecting an acolyte.
I
don't know. There's lots of possibilities. I expect all of them to be churned through before we get season 2. But I don't get the impression that Qimir is like an actual Sith. I get he is Sith adjacent, because when you think about all the BS of the Rule of Two, we had the Inquisitors, we had Dooku who had Ventress, we had Dooku who had Savage, we had Maul who had Savage. Like, come on, there's people that are roaming the out there with red lightsabers all over the place. And
yeah, Dooku was constantly shopping for new apprentices. It was ridiculous.
Always, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I'm thinking, like, maybe even Plagueis isn't technically the Sith master, but he's actually just quote unquote the apprentice at this point.
Yeah.
And then Qimir is his acolyte.
Maybe. Yeah, I think to your point, there's a lot of possibilities and there's a lot of directions they can take this. To me, the most critical thing that we know based on seeing this, when we see it, the way it's introduced. And to be clear, if you read some of those articles that have come out, interviews with Leslie, one of the things that she mentions is that they had originally considered this being the stinger at the end instead of Yoda. And that the reason they opted not to do that was because they didn't want to take away from what they called Osha's triumph. And in particular, didn't want to end on an ominous note. So instead, they moved this to earlier in, and I think it works very, very well here. But the thing that it tells us, again, is not so much like, oh, he's been pulling the strings or he's had this or that relationship with Qimir or what, because we don't know any of that right now. But here's what we do know. We know that he eventually discovers the power to create life and to keep people he cares about alive. And therefore, he will be very, very interested in Osha and May. That's what we know.
Yeah, and he may already know a bit because we've seen that Qimir killed Osha already. So there might be a little bit of that knowledge generally about in the Sithosphere, or whatever the Sith internet is.
That's tricky to say. Sithosphere. I love it.
It may already be out and about already, but we know that Osha and May represent a power. And actually, Leslie did go into the power of creation being fundamentally feminine, and absolutely from an archetypical and symbolic perspective, it is a feminine power. But he's going to want to possess it.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. That's what hence that. Yeah, this probably is Dark Union, and like absolutely. So.
And also him coming in at this moment says, okay, look, the lovers look like they are going to be okay at the end. But remember that creepy guy that's living in the cave? Yeah. Right. Yeah. So there's always going to be another bigger fish to fight.
Right. And it's important that it's one that is not external, right? It is internal because he's inside the cave. He's inside what now is effectively their home, right? And so this will be a bigger threat, but it is a threat from within.
Yeah, and beyond sort of this dragon and the sick king, which is sort of the hero's challenge, the next sort of archetypical antagonists are the invader and the empty throne for the queen arc. I need more time to think about how that might apply if, say, Qimir ends up becoming more of a main character and is in his queen arc phase. Because usually that is that everything is stable for a while and the kingdom is invading and the sick king is there and is unable to handle the problem.
Yeah, we'll see. Another thing to keep in mind with Plagueis is going to be that if he's going to attempt what we have been told he does, which is to keep his loved ones from dying. That's what we were told that he does.
Could have been a lie.
Well, it could have been a lie, but here's the thing. That's not balance in the Force.
Yeah.
Because on some level, you have to accept the life-death life cycle and allow things to die when it is their time, right? And that is how rebirth happens. Like, that's kind of the whole concept, is that death is not bad per se. It is a necessary aspect of the cycle. And you can only have life with death, right? This is the life-death life cycle that Clarissa Piccola Estes talks about. It is necessary and we embrace it. And that is how we create new life. And so if he's going to sort of arrest this process and, successfully do this, learn how to do this. And again, it's framed as a dark side ability. Then I question whether that means that somebody in one of these characters is actually going to be in a crone state. Right? Because they are spiritually dead, even though they're actually alive.
Yeah. We'd have to see.
So we'll see.
But I do think that it's just saying, hey, look, even though you think triumph is here, there's always something lurking in the shadows that you haven't dealt with, because wholeness is something that you always have to be working on too.
Yeah.
We cut back to Soul, who is
Vernestra, right? Because she says she's trying to send a message. Oh no,
Soul ever so briefly, because he decides to send the beacon to the Jedi, the transmission.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and Basil's being suspicious of Soul.
Okay.
Right. But then back to Vernestra, who is calling somebody.
Yeah.
And okay, so we need to talk about this, because this is
was that supposed to be Yoda, or I don't know. I'm confused now.
I don't know. So she's like whisper yelling. This is a specific technique that actors use to basically say, I'm hiding a secret, but I'm very upset. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, she's doing a whisper yell. The person's like, he's busy or whatever. I know he is, but I need you to get him a message. It's urgent. And then the person's like, this is highly unorthodox. Like, I'll see what I can do. Yoda's in the temple. Come on.
Yeah, presumably. That's why I was like, it doesn't make sense for it to be Yoda, because he's there.
Who who is she
contacting?
Who you calling, Vernestra?
Yeah, what are you up to? I
don't get like
Sith
vibes from
No,
her.
me neither.
But like, there's something going on that, like, is it an ally in the Senate? Is it
maybe?
Like, this to me feels like a thread that like still is open, because
I agree. I don't think that we saw the answer to this in this episode. I think this is for next season, hopefully, knock on wood. But I think and this kind of brings me to the whole thing about, I know that people who have read the books some people are upset about how Vernestra has changed from what they last saw in the books. And I have two thoughts about that. One is that I actually think that it's very, very difficult to do time skips well, because you end up having a lot of character development happen off screen, so to speak. And that's just really hard to do well. And it's very hard to make satisfying and convincing, and to bring people along for these changes to the character. On the flip side, if you have a time skip and don't have the character change at all, it does not ring true. It feels very weird. A good example to me is if you saw the Gilmore Girls reboot, like, Rory has aged 10 years and hasn't changed at all.
Yeah.
At all, like, in terms of her personality. And it makes her seem really pathetic and petty and, like, just incredibly unlikable, because she hasn't matured at all. So
yeah, and on the other swing side, when some men saw Luke Skywalker and he was grumpy and old and wanted nothing to do with the galaxy in his hermity phase, they couldn't deal, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's the intention with Vernestra here. I think Vernestra has been through some shit, and we don't know all of it yet. We have some hints, but we don't really know all of it yet. But I do think that eventually we are going to learn more about how she became the way she is, just like we learned about how Luke became the grumpy old dude he is in The Last Jedi. And so
yeah. And I do think that, like, there's still opportunity for her to learn from her mistakes.
Oh, sure. Totally agree.
And I think that of all of the characters, because of her connection to Qimir, she is more likely to be an elder that is redeemed.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I don't think she will end like Saul, because if only because, while I think she's been making some very poor decisions, she's actually doing them quite clear-eyed. Yeah. Like, she seems very conscious of what she's doing. So it's not denial. It's more like this active subterfuge. So
it's like, I think it's like she's had to take on and I have some thoughts at the end of this episode with our little green friend
Yes.
on the role that she actually is changing into, because currently she's ultra Snow Queen.
Yes,
And
super Snow Queen. Totally agree.
and it's all about the little gaggle around her, but
Mhm.
because of the sick king, because the Jedi can't get their shit together, she has to grow up and become a king herself, a king archetype, because the kingdom is under threat. That's
Mhm.
currently what I'm thinking, but we'd have to see what happens next season.
Yeah, but it's definitely one of my favorite open threads, to be honest, is that, Vernestra,
She's really interesting.
she's so complex and interesting, and especially to your point, her relationship with Qimir and everything, her relationship with the Senate. There's so many fun things happening, and now that she's had to make this decision about soul and everything, like that's gonna do huge things to her psyche. So we're gonna see some big
and they're not
movement.
afraid to play with the characters' psyches like this and show what the results are, and it's so great.
Yeah. I love it.
Cut back to Qimir and Osha, who are heading back to Brendock, and we see the moons in alignment as
almost
a
in eclipse
rise.
Again. Yeah.
Which is foreshadowing, of course, the sisters realigning. A moonrise represents a start or a new phase or a renewal / transformation. So we are headed to transformation land. They're heading down to the planet, and he's like, all the way back home.
Yeah. He's such a dork, and she's like, bloop, turns him off.
And we get a shot of the fortress as they fly by, as she says they're already here. And, we've talked about, obviously, the sort of V feminine symbolism of what the fortress is, with the little tiny triangle feminine symbolism in the middle.
Yeah.
But it also sort of looks like a crucible or an arena, which is...
Oh, I love that. You're right.
Which is visual symbolism for, it's going down. Tonight.
Something's going to be forged here. And the whole thing about like the concept of like something being forged is that you melt something down, you put it in this intense flame, which has happened in this exact location, in order to create something new. And it's a harsh process. It's a very harsh process.
And in some ways, like we talked about how this is kind of like a cop drama. You got to return to the scene of the crime.
That's right. Yeah.
To resolve all of these feelings and all of these issues and all of this stuff, so you can come away from it with resolution.
Right. And if you've listened to our nostalgia episode, we talk a lot about the misuse of ruins in a lot of the recent work, especially from the sequel trilogy. And to me, this is the correct use of ruins, right? Yep. Because they're not going, oh, remember this wonderful childhood? They're like, no, bad stuff happened here, and we're going to confront it and deal with it directly.
Exactly. Yeah. And then so Soul sees them land and is going through it. All of the emotions are on his face.
Oh, man. Yes. His acting, by the way, in this whole, oh my gosh, amazing. Yeah. So good. So
I'm heartbroken for this. Like, it hard.
Hurts. It's so sad.
And he approaches the center of the crime scene and calls for May. And he remembers the past, and you hear the echoes of what has happened in the past to us as a remembrance. And it's mainly children screaming. Yep.
Oh. So sad.
And Osha and Qimir land, and they approach the fortress, and she points the elevator. The elevator, getting this operational is the only way in.
Unless you want to climb.
And then she turns around towards the panel, and he's gone, and he's like in her head. Are you sure? Remember, Osha, he can fly.
Oh my gosh. It's so cool.
It's so cool. This was a very sexy scene.
It was. Well, hey, he can talk in her head now.
Yes, he can.
What's that? Oh, I love it. I know. They could do so many hot things with this, just to be clear.
The fan fiction is going to be
the fan fiction will be sublime.
so good. So Sol approaches the belly of the fortress, the place of his greatest failure in his mind. And actually he gets super creeped out by it. Like his face, his acting, he's like, oh. Blah.
Yeah, he sees the broken bridge there and he runs away.
He runs away, like, because it's shame. He backs away in shame and pain. Like, he's in full denial of everything he has done and the pain that he has caused.
And you hear the ghostly vocalizing of the witches, similar to how they sounded at Ascension. And it's like they are judging him.
Yes. And then we see May climb out of the pit where she last passed into the underworld, out of the center of the fortress. This is her rebirth. Okay.
Yes.
But I have a question for you.
Okay.
Did it not look like Ben climbing out of the pit in The Rise of Skywalker?
Yes. But listen, the framing of that shot was a choice.
Mm-hmm. It was exactly the same. The one hand, like...
Yep.
Yeah.
And based on everything else we know, all these other interviews, everything else at this point,
Yeah.
I
She's
think
telling
that's
us
purposeful.
she sees us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She sees, and she's telling us she sees us, and she's telling us this is going to be different.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
Sol continues to call for May. And I wanted to ask you if that reminded you of anything else you've ever heard in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Ray!
Yep.
Ray!
Yeah.
Ray!
Yeah.
But this is purposeful.
Yes. Yeah. It's so sad because again, we were so sure in previous episodes that he would be healed. We were so sure. And with every moment that passes of this episode, you just realize that his fate is sealed.
Yeah, it feels like a death march sometimes.
It does. It's very painful, and he keeps calling for her, and you know that when that confrontation that he thinks he wants finally happens, that will be it for him.
Mm-hmm. Osha comes into the room where the fire happened, May comes into the room which was Osha's, where the fire happened, and kind of looks around and is kind of, I don't know, stunned in a way. Like, this was her home. This was maybe their bedroom. Maybe they shared it.
And they had scenes with their mother here. The one where the mother has them now hug each other until you love each other and everything like that took place here.
Yeah.
And so I want to point out that coming into their childhood bedroom is like kind of re-entering a womb almost.
Yeah. Osha opens the panel to the elevator and we get a shot of a blue triangle and 2 green triangles and a red triangle. Oh my gosh, is that Sol, Osha, May, and Qimir?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And part of the way we know it is because the green triangles representing the girls are repeated later on. And then obviously you have the blue and red lightsabers for Sol and Qimir.
Which almost happened immediately after this.
Right. So yes, those triangles representing those characters is deliberate.
So Sol continues his maze, which again sound like Rey, like how Finn was saying Rey so many times in Tross, but this is purposeful and calls the Predator, his shadow version, to him, right? It calls Qimir to him, and Qimir says, "Thank you for leading me to her. We make a great team."
We make a great team. That was a line. Oh man,
great.
That was something.
And then, I do want to point out that anytime you have a lightsaber battle in Star Wars, it's over the soul of a person. And this is important because if you think about like Duel of the Fates as an example, it was fundamentally who was going to be responsible for training Anakin and what the fate of the entire galaxy would be. But this is about whether or not the twins are going to get to choose their own fate.
Yes.
Qimir doesn't ever force a choice on Osha, but Sol wants to prove that he is right about the virgins. About the virgins. and so is greedy and wants them for his own purposes.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very hard story for people who only see things in black and white.
Yep.
A bad guy is doing something good, and a good guy is doing something bad.
Yeah.
God, I
Yeah.
love this fight so much.
It's so good. And I mean, just straight up from all the kung fu movie aspect, and all the crouching tiger,
and the
hidden dragon.
wuja like floating and stuff like
yes.
that.
It's beautiful.
Soul's like, I will destroy you if I must. Okay.
Not if she gets you first.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And when he pulls out the short lightsaber, the wakizashi length one, and they go back and forth and they're very equal, Soul gets more and more and more aggressive and pissed off. And the kicks and the fights go back and forth. And I'm obsessed about the moment when he kicks him 4 times.
Yes. So good.
And then Qimir throws his blades at him and then pulls them back with the force, which I've done in video games. To see it actually done in like a live action show was so cool. And then Soul deflects them with the force.
Yes. So cool. Oh, it was amazing. And it was important that we saw Soul you had to see Soul's power, right? It was important to see how powerful he is. Right. And he demonstrates his power by, yes, he's a great swordsman, but he was so capable even without his lightsaber. And he had both these defensive abilities and these offensive abilities, the kicks, the using the force to push the lightsabers away. Like he demonstrates this incredible level of power. And that's very important because we have to understand what that means about Osha's power when she is able to take him down.
Exactly. And then we have a cut to Osha entering their childhood room, which again you said was returning to the womb, and I totally agree. It's also something that's really important that Campbell always says, which is, with the agony of love, the sickness that doctors cannot heal, the wound that cannot be healed, can only be healed by the weapon that delivered the wound. And so it's important that they meet here, but that they have reversed costumes and attitudes. Osha is angry and is confronting her sister for everything that was taken from her. Listen to me, all of this death, everything that happened. This was all your fault.
Because you didn't want me to become a Jedi. And so I failed and you got what you wanted.
And then she's like, my hatred of you, my grief over our mother. This is when we start to realize that she is getting, although she has entered like a hero phase, like a baby hero phase. She's like, I'm going off on this adventure.
Right.
She is actually teetering on the edge of bully because the bully is sort of the opposite of the hero in that they have embraced the wounds society has given them and refuses to pull apart or refuses to re-embrace society and try to be healed, but pulls themselves away from society and says, it's all society's fault and I'm the victim. And it prevents them from healing. So you got what you wanted. I never became a Jedi, or I guess you got what you wanted. And May tries to explain and says, Soul killed our mother. I saw it with my own eyes. He lied to you since the moment you left home. You didn't fail, he did. And Osha immediately explodes.
She completely loses it. Because again, this goes back to like what happens when the thing that you've believed in, the thing that you've believed is good your entire life, when that is revealed otherwise, that is so hugely destructive to your psyche because your whole concept of reality is built on that.
Exactly.
So she refuses to accept it.
Exactly. And Osha realizes that May is carrying Pip and she's like, Pip! And he rewards her with an eye full of oil. Because the droid doesn't recognize her anymore because he's also changed because he's a new familiar.
So he's not hers anymore.
And then we get this amazing cut of the girls or the twins kicking each other, high kicking.
Yeah, their legs cross, and then it cuts immediately to the lightsabers crossed. But I do want to say before we move away from this, the fight between May and Osha is incredible. And for the life of me, I'm not sure how they did it, because like I know that she had stunt doubles and everything, but
Digital
you're
magic.
constantly turning and seeing her face, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's so good. Like I just like I know that one of those is a stunt double, and that then they just, to your point, they just like mapped her face on, but it's really, really well done.
They have the Mission Impossible face mask or something.
God, it's so good. It's so good. But also like the choreography is great. It's beautiful. It's amazing fight scene. Really, really good.
Yeah, it was great. And then Sol and Qimir stop just as to see the Jedi arriving, and Sol says, "Oh, now you will pay for what you have done."
Yep. And this line.
Oh, they're not here for me.
Oh, what a line! What a line! They're not here for me.
Yes, because he speaks nothing but the truth.
It's true. Yeah, he knows. He knows.
Because he knows the Jedi too. And I do have a theory of how they might be connected.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
We'll get to it later on. The fight continues, and we see the Jedi ship again, the girls fighting, and then they look up through the hole in the roof, and then we see them top down, and they look kind of like a yin-yang or a double yoke or something, so they're twins. Yep. Again, this is like the womb symbolism, rebirth, and then May runs.
Yep.
She's like, I'm not fighting you anymore. The fight continues with Sol and Qimir, and he tries to bring the lightsaber, sort of like they're in a lock, and he tries to bring the his Sol's lightsaber to his helmet so he can zap it. But he gets the upper hand. Sol flips it around and cuts through Qimir's lightsaber, which represents your life.
Yep.
So this is a spiritual ego death.
Yep.
And so Qimir,
he killed him here,
is dead.
Yes.
R.I.P. Qimir.
Yes.
And what's fascinating is, after this moment, he is technically reborn because of the text of the show, because we find out officially his connection almost in a scene in a bit to Vernestra. So he is no longer the stranger. He is now Vernestra's former pupil.
He is known.
He is known.
Now. So he removes his helmet.
Yep.
And turns to face Sol. And Sol has the lightsaber at his throat. And there's this long moment where you can see Sol trying to decide whether to go through with it. And before he's able to make that decision,
May attacks him and disarms him.
May attacks him and disarms him. And she is holding his lightsaber in her hand. And then Qimir says to her, Good May. Feel your anger. And she throws the lightsaber aside, like Luke, I will mention. Yeah. Throws the lightsaber aside, and it chips. And the crystal, you can see it, it's exposed.
Like Sol's heart.
Yes, like Sol's heart exposed. And Qimir continues, strike him down, and your journey will be complete. He is echoing Palpatine here. This is what Palpatine says to Luke. Again,
they get an employee manual when you join the Sith. All of the statements are read in there.
Yes, it's true. Like, this is the script. So May is Luke here, and Qimir is Palpatine. But so it's strike him down, and your journey will be complete. And May says no. And this is the moment that she passes from maiden to hero. This is her moment where she individuates herself from her mentors, both dark and light, from the authority. No. And this is where we see her growth, because all she wanted was to kill him. And now she says no.
And she seeks justice instead of
says, I want him to face the High Council, the Senate, the Republic. I want him to pay for his crimes. And even with all this growth that she's demonstrating, Sol still goes, I did the right thing.
And I wanted to protect you both, i.e., I want to babyfy you even now.
Yep.
You good little girl. I was trying to protect you. I knew what was best, even though I was naive.
Yep. but it's I wanted to save you both. And she says, from what? And so then he starts talking about the power of the virgins. And again, in this
he also
moment,
says you're not twins.
You're not twins. You're not sisters.
You're
just
the same
you're one
person.
Yeah, you're the same person.
Like, okay, so like from a femme perspective, this is like
they're refusing to learn the names, right?
Yeah, refusing to learn the names, but also like unwilling to see individuality in women, and that women can be all sorts of different flavors and colors and shapes and all of these things. No. Like the patriarchy tells you have to be one thing.
Yes, you must fit within this, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's like the Madonna horror thing, right? Yeah. It's like you must fit within
and he could
one
get
of this
it when
paradigm.
They were Madonna horror, but when they're not, they have to be the good little girl.
Right.
Because the predator does not like the duality of women.
Nope. Yeah.
I don't know how your mother did it, but there is something to do with the virgins in the planet. You were created.
Yep.
Created life, I believe. She used the force to create you and Osha. In the history of the galaxy, very few have been that powerful. They have records of this?
Well, but also, like, again, it's this emphasis on the power rather than the humanity of the girls. Like they as people have completely receded from the conversation in his mind. He's not thinking about that at all. He's only thinking about the power that they represent, and that's it. Nothing else. And so as
listening intently.
Right. And as he's giving this speech and he's saying this, he does not see that behind him now, Osha picks up his lightsaber. And so I want to clarify, she has just come through the door. And there are so many thresholds, so many doors, so many passageways in this whole episode. They're just everywhere, all over the place.
But this was the door that May came through when she saw her mother stabbed. So that's significant.
And it's significant because now both girls passing through this door this is the Bluebeard story. They've both entered that cellar, which is what happens. Again, in the variation, we talked about the robber bridegroom. He marries each sister in turn. He marries the first sister, and then she enters the cellar and discovers the bodies, and then he traps her there. And then the second sister comes in and he does it. And then the third sister comes in and she's the one that rescues them. But now both sisters have come through this door to witness the crimes that Soul has committed, or rather the one particular crime, but they both have experienced this now. So again, back to the duality of women, even though they're two different people, they're also the same. And together they have now both come to this realization or they are coming to this realization. So,
and May recognizes that Osha is present. And
she sees her there.
She says,
he does not, she does.
Yeah. You killed her. You killed our mother, because she really wants her.
She wants him to say it.
And he finally says, yes, I did. And Osha's like,
is that true?
Is that true? And she's broken. Like, she sounds like
so
a child.
Heartbroken.
Like,
she
Amandla, what the hell? You
did
the
so
shit
good
out of this episode.
So good. So good.
I was protecting you. And if it was the right thing to do, why didn't you tell the Jedi?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, honey. Oh, because they're cops.
Yeah.
No.
It's true though.
But because they couldn't they feel like the institution is too big to fail. And if you've ever seen any documentary where they use those words, it's gone the way of corruption.
Yep. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So she asks, and he continues trying to justify himself and explain it away.
Without
and eventually
there was no proof.
Yes. Yeah. And again, it's like seeing her as a means to an end, not a person.
Yeah.
But just that. And so she comes to this realization, and so he's still trying to justify himself, and she says, stop talking.
But I want to point out,
oh yes, go ahead.
Of course, I wanted to tell you many times, but I couldn't stop talking. And then he's like, I kept this from you to give you a life you always dreamed of. I did everything because he was going to say, I love you.
He was going to say, I love you.
And she chokes him.
She choked. Yes.
right? Because he's been Bluebeard all along.
Yep.
And she discovered it, and her eyes are fully open to the situation. She finally understands the truth. She finally is able to confront the bodies in the closet, you know? And she's touching the crystal and the lightsaber at the same time, and it starts to turn red because it's cut through the edge of the saber.
And what she realizes in this moment as this, she's bleeding this crystal, which is incredible because it's the first time we've ever seen it in canon, which is so exciting, or at least on film, is what she's realizing in this moment is when he was about to say, I love you, she realizes that's a selfish love. It's not the generous, self-giving love of her mother. When her mother said, I love you, and her mother chose to let her go.
Yep.
That is the kind of love that she wanted and expected and deserved. And that's not what Saul had been giving her.
And it's what he took away from her.
It's what he took away from her. He took away that love, that real true love of her mother. And George Lucas talks about this, the difference between a selfish love and a selfless love.
Yep. And
like he talks about this a lot. And it's because it's Anakin's problem too. Anakin's love for Padme became selfish because he was so terrified of losing her that he would destroy everything. Right.
And he wanted to possess her, which is exactly what we saw with Soul. Soul sort of whispers out in his chokiness, Osha, it's okay. Like he forgives her even though he knows he's going to die.
Yeah.
Which is like maybe the last act by which we want to see Force Ghost Soul because we want to have him back.
I want Force Ghost Soul because I think that he has the potential to become a mage.
Yeah. Yeah.
He has the potential to learn from his death, his literal death in this case.
And they could
to learn from it.
Like a cursed spirit for a while, which I think would be a really dope thing to add to the story, and then have him
be cool.
Like become a Force Ghost eventually, which would be a mage.
I would love that.
Sometimes they call them in Campbell calls them saints too when they're past the mage phase, because the mages are on Earth, but the saints, because they're one with the Force and one with the universe. But I do want to talk briefly about betrayal of the father, and we did talk about Iphigenia and how she was sacrificed by Agamemnon to be able to go to Troy. Many women, from a heroine's journey perspective, when they find out that they have been betrayed by the masculine, right? So betrayed by their fathers or betrayed by the system of patriarchy that they live under, they quite literally cannot stand to live under masculinity any further. So they will go and like leave and go in the woods and leave society. So much like the handless maiden later on in the story, she actually needs to go and live in the woods for a while to regenerate. It is quite common psychologically that they don't even trust men for a really, really long time and can't even be under patriarchy. So that's when you have women that like go and join communes or go and join artists somewhere, like when they've truthfully been betrayed and they finally realize the betrayal they have experienced, psychologically there's almost like a whiplash to it sometimes. Maureen Murdoch talks about it in The Heroine's Journey. I feel that the actions that Osha is taking is symbolically that, because she is going to become the opposite of everything that he represented. And we see that when as she sort of the bleeding into the lightsaber that is happening in this moment, we see the light, like the crystal, sort of get redder and redder as this is happening. And I want to tie this to a moment in the heroes phase that Campbell talks about with regards to when Siegfried fights the dragon in the darkness of the cave. And he there's a great, you can watch Power of Myth, it's almost in the first episode. So he's talking about of dragon power, and when Siegfried has killed the dragon, he actually tastes the blood and hears the song of nature, because the darkness actually becomes part of him. That's my interpretation. He has transcended his own humanity and has associated himself with the powers of nature, which are the powers of life and from which our minds are removed. So in this moment, She is becoming one with her own darkness and is becoming a thing of pure instinct. And yes, that ends up presenting herself as a murdering person, but it is symbolically sometimes what we need to do, which is to become part of the darkness, to become more whole eventually. We have to go down to become whole again. So this is her lowest point. This is her catabasis moment. She has become a death goddess, the death goddess in her dreams, just like how Inanna went to go see her sister Ereshkigal. In many stories, when you go and travel into yourself, you actually end up seeing yourself. So think of Rey in the TLJ cave. She went into the darkness and saw herself. This is what she saw in her vision. She has become the death goddess.
Yeah.
And so she kills him.
Mm-hmm.
Qimir approaches to comfort her with like a couple of fingers on her.
Mm-hmm.
And she pulls out the lightsaber and fully lashes out. And we see the coolest effect in Star Wars with a lightsaber we have ever seen, which is the bleeding of the lightsaber, it fully changing color as she holds it, shaking with anger and hate. Back to what I said about the bully archetype. If you taste the blood, but you get stuck in the darkness and you don't incorporate it, you become a bully or a coward. You get stuck in your darkness. You're off balanced. And that is what has happened to her.
Yep. Yeah. It's an amazing moment, though. It's wild how, even though it's a horrible thing she's done and it's a horrible thing that's happened to her, it is weirdly very cathartic.
Mm-hmm. For her to even have her own agency and control over her own situation and her own body and her own choices. Her hate and her sorrow and her pain are all on the surface, and thus in the heart of the crystal, her father's heart.
Mm-hmm.
I'm struck by how much this reminds me of the death of Padme.
Gosh, yeah. Wow. No, you're so right. You're so right.
We see the reflection of the red saber in her eyes, like how we saw it in the cave.
Yeah.
Remember your time in the cave.
Yeah.
Oh, Yoda.
I know. Wow. It's such a powerful scene. I'm so impressed with how they did it.
And so let's talk about death goddesses. In the myth of Persephone, it was actually Zeus that betrayed Persephone and gave her to Hades. So we have another betrayal by the father, because in some versions of the myth, Zeus is actually her father. We have Vernestra and the Jedi leaving their ship. And in this moment, Qimir just watching his wife go nuts.
Yeah.
You hear, and Vernestra touches the Force and goes, You're alive? And Qimir, scared,
freaks out. Yeah.
Grabs his helmet on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, Dark Mother is mothering.
Yes.
and knows he's alive. And so instantly, because he has been reborn, he is no longer the stranger. He is no longer Qimir. He is now Vernestra's pupil, son, metaphorically, symbolically, right? So we have a new identity for him. So when his lightsaber was cut in half, he spiritually died, his ego died, and so we have a new formation for him.
Yes, he is completely new archetype now.
Archetypically, I'm saying coward.
Oh, I agree. Because the second she showed up, he was like, "Oh no!" Yeah.
And she's upset and says, "I know where they are." And Mog's has a nice conversation with Basil. Basil, what's going on?
Yeah, and apparently he speaks that language just like Yor did. What? I don't know.
It was a club of two.
Yeah. I just picture the two of them sitting there.
It was like Latin club in high school. There's
two people. Right? I know. Oh my God, it's so true.
Yeah. And it's Qimir out. And
yeah.
He's just gone.
Yeah, he nopes out.
We look around for him because Osha and May are talking, and they look around and he's gone.
He's not there. He disappeared completely. He went from so concerned about wifey to oh crap, he's mom's here. I gotta go.
Peace out. Just gone.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really funny because the ego thinks it's in charge, but really when you're worn down to nothingness, it's only instincts that are in charge.
Yep. All id. Anyway.
May
So
offers
Osha and May,
comfort.
they escape. Yeah, well, May offers comfort, but then she's also, gonna guide her out.
Yeah.
Is what she's gonna do. Follow me, right?
And they go into the underworld again.
Yep. Yeah. And it's do you trust me? And she doesn't say yes, but basically she means yes. And so yes, they both descend into the underworld. And May shows Osha the shaft. And as our astute listeners pointed out, birth canal, yes, that she escaped through as a child.
But they're twins because they were born together.
They're twins. They're born together. Exactly.
So they get to leave
they
together.
Get to go. Yeah, they're reborn together. And so they go through that. And again, the other similar, keep in mind, this is Luke. Luke also fell down, into the shaft after death, and then he came out, and then he was retrieved by his twin.
Yep.
So again, this is the May Luke parallels are intense in this episode. There's a lot of them. Also, as they pass down this
green arrows
panel, yes, that you see these green triangles illuminate along the walls as they pass down. So again, they're associating the girls back to those green triangles we saw on the elevator control panel. And we understand, seeing this, May has actually been mythically dead for most of the story.
Yep. And she was only reborn when she came to confront Soul.
Right. Exactly.
What? But that makes sense because she's been in these shadow archetypes. She's been stuck in the underworld.
Yep.
I love you, Leslie. You're giving so much to my show.
It's amazing. It's so great. I love it.
So much to work with. Thank you. I love it.
I love it. So then Vernestra and the rest of the Jedi enter the courtyard.
Yeah. And she sees Soul.
Yes. And she hears the echoes of what happened there.
And she
of
understands.
His crimes.
Yeah. And they go and see go and look around, but we see Qimir, scared of mommy, up in the rafters like a belfry, like a vampire bat.
Phantom.
He's
like the Phantom.
He's like the Phantom. He is. I know he was compared to Dracula in one of the interviews, which is great. But there he is. He's so scared because he's baby and mommy's there.
He's like watching, and as he's watching, she leans down and whispers something to Soul's body, and you don't hear what it is.
We find out what it is later.
Yeah, you find out what it is later, but you don't hear in this moment. You don't hear, but Qimir is watching, and when she kind of sits up and like senses and turns, he's gone.
He's gone. No, mommy.
Yeah, he had to run away. It's too scary.
But he immediately goes and is heading towards the twins. Osha, you did all this when you were little, and then what did you do? And they come to the willow tree because that's always where Osha was. So May thought that she would return there. I sat here and I waited.
Oh,
my heart.
It's heartbreaking.
Osha says, I'm sorry I didn't believe you. And then they come and May holds her face. This is such a good moment. I'm sorry I started the fire. And they break down and they cry. They are together. I'm so happy.
I know.
And then they
start to say their little rhyme.
We wanted this
and
so
I want to call out, by the way, so we haven't covered this much at all in this series, but please go listen to any of, let's see, what do we have? The episode on What the Fiction about Crash Landing on You, where we talk about the soul song, the heart song.
Yes, this is a heart song. Yeah.
This is a heart song.
Yes, this is a heart song. I don't know that we could claim it so much before, but now we know.
No, now we know now. And the fact that the memory thing happens here in a minute, that really just reinforces it, because often the heart song is the way to return the memories as well. So, and part of the way you know that she's losing the memory is the fact that she can no longer recall the heart song. So again, this is their heart song. And it always is the motif that represents the tie between the emotional ties between two people, the soul deep ties between two people. Their heart song.
And they even asked who taught us that, and she's like, Osha says, I thought you made it up. But to me, because it's a heart song, it's actually something that is born of both of them. So I actually think that maybe it was just something that they both came up with at some point.
I agree. I think the whole point is you're not supposed to know the origin of it, because the point is it's just the thing that the two of them share.
Yeah, and
it is the heart song.
It's mystical. It can be also considered to be like the red string of fate. It is the thing that ties them together, etc. Qimir shows up and force grabs the lightsaber. Oh, sexy.
Yes, super hot.
If I can find you, so can the Jedi. Speaking the obvious. Can we flash to Basil being a sniffer guy? Osha's still on her kick of, okay, well, but we'll tell the Jedi. Okay, but they're cops, Osha.
Yeah, and I like that he's like, you still believe in them? And it's like, I mean, he's right. Yeah. They have demonstrated over and over and over again that they cannot be trusted. They are cops.
Yeah, literally, these are the gods coming to turn you into lions.
Right. Yes. That is what is going to happen. They're going to come here and they're going to try to punish you. And you're going to stick around for that. Yeah.
Osha, when they find out how powerful you are, and then May finishes, you will meet the same fate as our mother. So in this moment, May is acknowledging that Osha has sort of transformed and is more powerful and needs to be protected because of the power that she represents, either would be coveted by somebody or would be destroyed by the Jedi. And of course, this is big femme power fantasy. You have power that is uncontrollable and also special magical girl. Yep. Right? Okay, I want to point out some Persephone related connections. So in Homer, at the opening of the underworld is populated by willow and black poplar trees. So it is a place of the entrance to the underworld. And willows often represent grief and death, rebirth and flexibility and healing. And marriage and death are often connected mythically. And so what's happening after this moment and after what we're going to talk about in a moment is the descent. So Persephone is getting married to Hades. Fundamentally, Demeter and Persephone used to be the same god, but are separating. And Persephone specifically means to destroy or slay. She is vengeance. She is the dark goddess. In many versions of the myth, more modern versions, instead of being stolen, Persephone actually chooses the underworld. So like in Mythic, the musical, or in Hades, the video game, there's actually this really great line after you get really, really past sort of the epilogue, where Hades jokes about how pomegranates don't grow naturally in the underworld. They all came from her, so she wanted to stay. And so I just want to like frame it. It's what is happening next is a wedding. We have the maid of honor, and we have the couple that is going to leave the family. And so Osha says, what do we do? And May says, well, what do you want to do? And so this is where we get the sort of confirmation of consensual union. Let my sister go. So goodbye, sister. And I will train with you. This is a marriage. This is a dark union. And she also knows that May wants to be free of Qimir. So this is her saying, do these things.
Yeah, May has chosen to separate herself from Qimir. And so she wants to make sure that can happen. The other thing, too, is aside from just the consensual aspect with what do you want, Osha, is also May affirming that she has changed and grown from who she was as a child when she didn't care what Osha wanted. She wanted to keep her there at any cost. And now she is willing to put Osha's desires first.
And it also ties to Osha wanting to explore her own power outside of the realms of maybe what is ever expected of her. And this is
the Jedi always defined the Jedi always defined the limits for her, what she could and could not do. And she wants to see what else is possible.
But she was always in the previous with the Coven, she was also defined on what she could and could not be.
True. That's
and
true.
So she's always wanting to be no, I want freedom. And that is what Qimir has offered her, freedom. in the way she wants to explore these things, at least on the surface, right? We don't know how it's actually going to play out in the future.
Right.
Qimir's like, I can attempt to wipe her memory. He says it much sexier than that. Remove any trace of you and me. So it's like, I'm going to separate you from your sister. So she agrees to stay, and she tells her sister she doesn't want to lose her again. It's like giving away a bride.
Yes, it is. And she says, you're going to do what you were meant to do, but I won't stop you this time.
Exactly. Aww. Giving away the bride. And then they handshake with the lightsaber as he hands it back to her, and they cross thumbs. Marriage under a willow tree. This is effectively like hand fasting or a catabasis union, where they are now in an alchemical union with each other. It is a wedding and a rebirth because they are starting a new life together. And they start to say the rhyme, and it was such an effective way to show her memory loss because they had just said it and now she can't remember the whole thing. One of the powers of Lord Hades of the underworld, much like Persephone coming down there, is to use the power, the river of forgetfulness, Lethe, it flows, and it removes the memories of the dead so that they can rest in peace. And so shades drink the waters and forget all of the pain and are in the underworld. And so both May and Osha are reborn in new ways. May is now symbolically dead because she has lost her memories and is a baby.
Yes. Yes.
And that's how the Jedi find her. You're under arrest. And she's like, what have I done?
What did I
I'm
do?
an 8-year-old child.
Yeah.
But she's got way more powers than that. And of course, that'll tie into uncovering her memories, etc. We flash to meeting with Vern.
Her dress is fantastic.
Yes.
It is. We're always here for fabulous dresses in Star Wars. We don't get enough of them ever since Padme took her fabulous self off to the afterlife. And so, and then her dresses got spaced, but we don't talk about that. So I was so excited to see Renesta's dress, even though she's doing truly horrible things in it. She looks fabulous doing it. So,
and she asks what May remembers is like, being captured, a fire, a man, he killed my mother.
I need to find someone to tell them.
Yep. I need to find somebody, but I don't remember who it is. And she's really sad actually for May, but she's also like kind of thinking two ways, which is how do I protect the institution too? Yeah.
How can I use this to protect the Jedi? Yep.
And so that man was a kind, brilliant, compassionate man who did a terrible thing. I.e., in the text, we are being told you can be a kind, brilliant, compassionate man who also has killed somebody.
Yeah, that's the point. The point is that these things both can be true. It's not just black and white. It's not simple.
You can be both.
You can be both. Yeah.
And that's the complexity of life, is that not only can soul be both, but all of us can have done terrible things in our lives and still be good people. Or we can be good people and have messed up. And that's the point of Star Wars, is to know that redemption is possible for everyone and know that it's a journey that we're always on.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen some people who will always question, what is the point of sympathizing with villains? Isn't that just excusing the bad things they've done? And it's not, because the purpose of sympathizing with villains in fiction is to be able to recognize the villain in yourself, because we all have it.
We all have it. Yeah. We've all done terrible things in our lives. We couldn't have not, right? Just living is hard.
Yeah. And the knowledge that you're capable of it at any point in time. Like it's, the potential is there if the right conditions appear. Right. That's important. So this is what it teaches us. And I really like the angle that this show takes on it, which of course becomes so stark now in this scene as it switches from her conversation with May to her meeting with the Senate delegation.
Yeah. And letting Soul take the blame as we flash back and forth over her speech, which is beautiful, but literally her covering up the murders.
Yeah. And referring to him as a rogue Jedi.
Yeah, a
and
rogue Jedi.
His actions were terrible, but it was only those of one man. And this is where we get into the way that, again, cops, frankly, you know, will typically excuse the actions of one of their own, is that they will say that it was just one person who made a mistake, or they're just a bad apple.
You heard a lot with people who are shooters. It's like, no, don't take away everybody's guns just because of one mad person. Like,
right.
Yeah. It's
right.
They always
this
do
refusal
this.
to hold the system. It's a refusal to hold the system accountable by placing all the blame on one person. And that's exactly what she does here.
And what happened to him? We believe he ended his own life.
Yeah. Yeah. Oof. And they cut to what she whispered to him. We saw it, but we didn't hear it. And now we see, she said, "I'm sorry, my friend." And I think that what's remarkable about her is what we said earlier. You know, Saul is in denial. He's in denial. He's literally running from the things that he does not want to confront all the way through. Vernestra does this eyes wide open. This is all deliberate. It is calculated. She knows exactly what she is doing.
Exactly. And so we cut to Osha. So briefly we cut back to Vern having her conversation with May. Does the name Osha mean anything to you? The Jedi have failed you, and I will help you if you help me. I need you to help me find someone. Yeah.
She's always working the angles here.
Exactly. Yep. And then we cut to Osha, who's staring off in the sunset.
Wait, no. Back up. A pupil of mine before he turned to evil. The Obi-Wan quote.
Oh, the Obi-Wan quote. Yes. Sorry. I apologize. Yes.
No. And, it's just important.
Then I'm just excited. I'm excited to get to the
I know. This ending is amazing.
We get staring at, Osha staring off into the sunset, and Qimir comes close. She's been holding the saber, and he grasps her hand, holding the saber between it, and his big hand covers hers. And that is the most romantic ending we've had
gotten in Star Wars ever.
Yeah.
Ever.
And when you compare it to the BB-8 and Rey looking off into the sun on Tatooine, the suns of Tatooine, it doesn't hold the candle to this. Thank you, Star Wars, for giving us this wonderful triumphant ending.
It is.
And then we get the stinger, which is Vernestra's like going to her boss. And we get his little green ears.
Oh my gosh. And he doesn't say anything, which is fine.
It's obviously the TLJ puppet.
Yes.
Which is amazing. But they don't say anything, but we know what it is. And Lori K.A. said, green bitch to green bitch. Yeah, I love it so much. It's great.
Yes. I'm really excited.
Yeah, and so, wow, what a show.
Yes.
What a show.
It's so hard hitting. It's just, and this is why I say I can't wait to go back and watch it again, is because it really took us on a ride. Like it did. It had so many twists and turns and unexpected things and stuff that I just didn't see coming. And I think to a great extent, it's because it was very bold, and it specifically did things in opposition to some of what we've seen in Star Wars in the past. And so it
was very challenging for you and I.
It's very challenging.
And yes. I think in the end we've enjoyed it a lot.
I loved it.
Just so much that it's given us, and it's given me a lot of energy, just in general, and also just interesting things that we will have a lot of time, because I don't feel like we dug into all of the things we could possibly have dug into.
There's so much.
We were just trying to keep up with the show.
Yeah.
And I did have some kind of open questions at the end here. How did Soul know Qimir?
I don't know. It's a really good question.
I think he knew him when he was a Padawan.
But this brings up the question of Qimir's age.
which I think he's older than.
Yeah.
He's probably
quite
older
old.
than 50.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the most likely outcome, that he would know Sol and Qimir, but Sol was so young he didn't understand this person, especially if Vernestra knows Sol so well. And she's been around for like 100 years before this.
This is why I wonder if, like you said, if we might get sort of a purgatory Sol next
There's so
season.
much stuff that would benefit from having him like dealt with in a way that he could be a spiritual guide.
Well, and he still needs guidance, and he still needs to learn and grow. He hasn't resolved a lot of things yet.
This is our campaign to bring back Lisa.
Yes, exactly. But so here's just a thought, and this is just throwing something out there. But consider the world created by Osha's possession, Mother Anasea's possession.
What if he's
that
stuck
sort
in
of
there?
Shadow realm? What if he's stuck in the shadow realm, and like the next time that Qimir ends up there, he's like, "Hey, wait a minute, what are you doing here?"
Yes.
And Sol's there.
That would
be
God.
So cool.
So cool.
Yeah. Or maybe Osha even finds him there.
Yeah. I know a lot of the articles came out and were like talking about how the ending was supposed to present kind of a, depending on the audience's perspective, they're doomed because there's Plagueis hanging out in their love cave. Or, oh, good, they're married. Literally 2 quotes from the creator, Leslie Headland. But, she also kind of clarified that, yes, there could be third paths available to them, obviously. But, as long as they're kind of on this dark journey, yes, it's going to be suffering. Yes, it's going to be hard. No one who is on the dark side is happy, truthfully, long term.
Yeah.
Because the relationship would inevitably, Qimir might try to change it to become more of a master.
Yeah. And or or they end up like in competition. Like, for instance, I think that it's notable that between the two of them, there's only one lightsaber right now.
Yeah. That's significant. Who gets to own the lightsaber?
Yeah. I mean, it's hers right now, but he also did just put his hand over it. And it's like, what does it mean?
So things could be, hard for them, and you have to struggle. And that's like one of the things that, like, it's hard to acknowledge is part of Star Wars. If we re-explore these characters, they're going to suffer.
It's not, I hate to say it, but it's not gonna be fluff. That's not what this story is. And so
it will be angst, and they could end up ending the story in a way that, like, they go off into the galaxy and we don't hear of, and they start the Knights of Ren, or they are the Ren, or something like that.
Who knows?
Who knows? There could be some cool thing that we're not aware of. But it's going to be harder, I would say, than they're the underdogs too. But we like cheering for scrappy underdogs, right?
Yeah, and we know they don't bring down the Jedi Order.
Yeah.
So, so it's going to be an interesting question to see where their story goes, how Plagueis
and they could be
factors into
used
it
as tools to gain the power that the dark side needs to actually start to fight back against the Jedi, i.e. giving Palpatine everything he needs to be successful, which makes me feel gross too.
Yeah. Ugh, Palpatine. Sheev, why?
Sheev, why? Yeah. Why, Sheev? But, I do think that I'm here for their angst and their romance and their struggle as well. So, because
listen, I read that they almost gave them a kiss. So I'm just like, I'm here for that kiss whenever it finally happens.
Yeah. And you got to struggle to, like, make these moments, and there has to be conflict in a couple. They have to fight for it too. And so I'm here for that. And I'm here for whatever story Leslie wants to tell me. She has earned more than enough. She had all my leeway to begin with, but she's earned even more. And she's given me a lot out of this show. And I'm absolutely loving it.
Yeah, she made a beautiful show. But more importantly, or not more importantly, but just as important to us, she's been so vocal about her love for Star Wars, her love for romance, her love for the fans, her like she and for people that feel shut out. That's what she says about herself. She feels like she's not, considered as someone who's not allowed to play in this space, right? And so she has empathy with other people that feel the same way. And so everyone who's ever felt, like we said, gatekept when it comes to Star Wars, this is for you.
Yep.
She's making this for you, and she says that's what she's doing. And so I love that, and it makes me so happy and so excited to see more from her.
We love you, Leslie. Thank you for an amazing show. And if you love this show, what you need to do is share it with your friends. Because both Missy and I have been through the heartache of losing a show that we absolutely love many times. And we don't want this to happen with the Acolyte.
Yeah.
So
it deserves more. Star Wars deserves more from this story.
Yeah. Be loud on the internet. And even after, it's been renewed, be louder.
Yeah. Keep being loud.
Well, I really, really appreciate all of the listeners who've come along on this journey. I'm not done. I'm sure there's going to be more to share. Missy, I want to thank you for doing this. I know it was a lot. But where can people find you if they're looking for more of your thoughts online?
You can find me right now on Tumblr, where I am All Girls Are Princesses. And thank you, Marie Claire. This has been great.
All right, everybody. Until next time, cheers. Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie Claire Gould, your host. Our music is orchestral music by Christy Carew for What the Force. You can support the show directly on Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We'd like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love What the Force: Sophie H., Derek C., Minky Moo, Sarah Joy, John, In Wild Space, How Rude, Anna Perez, Neil, Christian Luca, Carly Ann, Scott C., and Susan. Support the show by wearing the Force with our merch. Like and subscribe on YouTube, or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other pod apps. It helps people find the show. You can connect with us on Twitter at WT Force Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, our website, whattheforce.ca, or our Discord. Links are in the liner notes. Reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.